Can't spell OBS without BS, right? That's all right.
Welcome to Faith, Fiction, and Folklore, or as we like to call it, the Tri-F Podcast, where we try not to mess the podcast up. And tonight, we have got a crazy show. We overdid our research, I think.
Yeah.
We're going to start off. Yeah, it's going to be a big one. It's going to get kind of wild. So we're going to start off with a, well, I guess I'll just do the whole thing real quick. So we're going to start off with a refutation of Bill Donahue, who was shown last week. And I had thoughts, but I didn't get to say them because I was traveling. We wanted to do a continuation of USAID because Mike Benz was on Joe Rogan. And then we wanted to talk about drugs in the CIA. And then we wanted to talk about Valentine's Day. And then maybe we might get to the Black Hawk incident that happened earlier, like a couple weeks ago. So that's our show in general. Now, Cody.
Yo, buddy.
You do not ever get to make fun of me for entertaining the idea that Brandon Biggs might be legitimate. This guy is out of his... I'm going to be nice. You have no ground to stand on. The pot and the kettle, and they're both black, and you got nothing. That's all I got to say. Wow. I watched this, and I was like, wow, colostrum is Santa Claus. Wow. So, I'm like, I got to refute this guy. I just have to. There's no choice.
Yeah.
So I was going to leave
right.
it alone, but I can't. Not in good conscience. And I think everybody deserves to see the cat, too.
Jeremiah will be on in 5.
Jeremiah will be on in 5. Excellent. That'll be good.
Oh, nice.
He can help me tell you why you're wrong. So, all right. So here's Mr. Donahue saying Judas wasn't a bad guy. He was just misunderstood. Judas is one of those Disney villains, only he's like in Shrek or something, you know? It's like, oh, Captain Hook's not a serial killer. He's just misunderstood. Like, okay. We'll see. So, I don't know exactly when the stupidity starts. I have some time notes, though. Okay, let's begin with 3 minutes in. We're going to start with 3 minutes in. Actually, we're going to listen to this guy for a couple seconds first because he's special.
All right, we're doing a message tonight that, as I said, in Christian circles,
This is why I always know I'm forgetting something. Sorry, I was playing it at 1.5 speed, so I need to get it back down to regular speed.
Yep.
Excuse me. There
You just taught class.
not be allowed to be discussed. But anyhow, we're going to discuss that because we don't discuss what they do. And it's called Judas was not a bad guy after all. Or was he?
Yeah.
You have to make the decision about that.
Oh,
you
we
have to see in your own mind,
You
know, how the
I
evidence
have.
lies. I mean, what you'd have to do is be a jury. See, pretend you're a jury, and you reach a conclusion. Was he? Did he do wrong or not?
Jeremiah?
His name even has a meaning in Webster's. I mean, this.
Hello, sir. How are you?
Welcome.
Give me a second. Let me get us on the right screen. All righty.
Hello.
Hello, sir.
Hello. How's it going?
It's
Hey, buddy.
fantastic. So,
Am I showing up all right?
Yep.
give me
second.
just a minute, though. I
You're
gotta
glowing, my friend.
You are glowing.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I'm using a ring light. If it's too bright, let me know.
Oh, you're good. I got a ring light as well.
I wondered if your halo was artificial or real. Did you get sainted while you were at church?
Yeah, I rescued an orphan on the way home, and that's it.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
All right, give me just a moment here. I got to get your window set up for Bill Donahue. We're talking about Mr. Bill Donahue. I don't know if you got. Did you catch the intro, Jeremiah?
I did not. No, I was on the way home from the parish.
Yeah.
Well, to put it simply, there's this guy that Cody showed last week, and he's special. He's got a cat. So basically, the premise of his video is
Yeah,
that
yeah.
yeah, he's got a cat. It's fantastic. It's a glorious thing. No, so basically, there's the other window. What's going on is that this guy is saying that Judas is not a bad guy. Judas was just misunderstood, Jeremiah. He's like a Disney villain, you know. So we just need to see things from
Like
Judas's
the
point of
Gaston
view.
of the New Testament.
I'm sorry, what?
It's like that beefed up douche from
Oh yes.
what was it?
Gaston, yes,
Yeah.
Gaston. How could we forget Gaston?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does anybody get the live pulled up?
Yeah, I got it.
Are we actually all coming through? Am I on mute again? That would be
I didn't
embarrassing.
get a
Hang on, let me listen.
I didn't get a notification.
You didn't get a notification? Okay.
Does anybody get the live pulled up?
Yeah, I got it.
Are we actually all coming through? Am I on mute again? That would be
We got an echo now.
I can hear you.
Do we have an echo? Seriously?
Did for a second.
Huh, that's wild.
It was weird.
That is weird. All right, well, you guys talk and hold down the fort while I try to finish.
This is my echo.
Yeah.
Illuminati
So
confirmed.
what have you guys already talked about with this guy?
Oh, we
not much.
just
We just
started.
listened to
Like
a
I
little
gave
bit.
the introduction,
Okay,
and then
good.
you arrived. So you're like right. Your timing was perfect.
Have you listened to him before? Do you know who he is?
I haven't. I think I saw you share something about him in the Telegram, but
Okay.
I don't know much about it. I have heard people espouse this theory before. Funny, the first time I ever heard somebody talk about I don't think Judas was all that bad. He was like a cartoonishly evil, like cult leader in a horror movie. That's the only other context I have for this kind of view before hearing about this guy.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to hear what you have to say.
He also
You know,
thinks.
it'll be interesting to hear somebody try to talk about how the son of perdition is actually just a decent dude who's misunderstood.
Yeah, he misunderstood Christ's instructions. It was all just like a big misunderstanding, guys. He just if he wasn't listening for if it wasn't for the fact that he was listening to those dad blame Christians, those silly apostles, he never would have misunderstood his instructions. He was just trying to help.
He was trying to use the silver to, buy cookies for the crew, man.
Yeah, the silver one. That's excellent. Silver for the cookies. Yeah. He was just. No, some people they don't have any luck. They get no respect. I tell you.
Yeah.
So, all right.
Well, all that luck.
Just more loaves and fish.
Yeah, like interestingly enough, there are a couple larger Orthodox parishes that will have like a wraparound icon that shows the 12 apostles, and they'll have the halos behind them. But when it gets to Judas at the end, it'll actually show a shadow of where Judas's head was, and then it'll show Judas in the background walking out the door, and there's a little devil on his shoulder, like talking in his ear.
That's interesting.
So like it's like he left behind what could have been to pursue his own wicked desires.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, on that pleasant note, I got the windows fixed. Took long enough. Apologies. But now we can begin this thing in earnest. I have Bible verses pulled up. And I just want to point out that my issue was that the facts that this guy mentions are so glaringly wrong. Like, it's not a matter of opinion. It's like glaringly wrong and inconsistent with the story of Scripture itself. So he doesn't even get the details right, which is why I got really mad. So we'll begin. Without further ado, here is William Donahue.
When you're bad, that's really bad. When your name has a meaning in Webster's dictionary, you're bad. In other words, that would be like saying, Al. You look up the word Al, my God, he's got a bad reputation. If you look up Webster's dictionary, yeah, I'm talking about you. If you look up in Webster's dictionary, the word Judas means traitor. That's what it says in Webster's dictionary. This guy, you talk about your name going down in history. How are you going to live that? And if you look up the word traitor, it says in Webster's dictionary, one who betrays under the guise of friendship. That's what a Judas is considered.
Hey, look, an
Good,
ad.
an ad. An Adobe.
Before that ad is over. over. Does it not seem
And what
like
we're gonna
that guy
look at,
took
we're gonna
like
look
a
at
plug of
Judas
bourbon
the
right
man.
before he started this video?
I'm sorry, say that again because I didn't
One more
hear.
time.
It looks like the way he's carrying himself, like it's like he just took a massive like slug of Jack Daniels right before he started the stream.
Oh yeah, he's pretty happy. He's in a good place right now.
He's drunk on the spirit, as some would say.
Oh, there you go. There you go. We'll call it that. Or well, it's a spirit of a sort. So
A
anyway.
spirit, yeah.
So Trevor, are we echoing, buddy? Because we did get a confirmation on whether or not we're echoing. We need to get that figured out. I don't want to go on if we're echoing. Oh, there you go. There you go. We'll call it that.
Hold on.
It's a spirit of a sort.
A spirit, yeah.
Okay, no, I think we're good. I'm hearing it.
Are we echoing, buddy? Because
Yeah.
Yeah, are we hearing Trevor's
we need to get that figured out.
video?
Is it just Trevor that's echoing?
I think Trevor.
Trevor, say something,
picking-
man.
We're picking up what Trevor's
Testing.
listening to.
Testing.
Ah. Well, no, we're supposed to. I'm trying to listen for an echo. But
Oh.
all right, we're professionals, folks. Don't mind us. Okay, anyway.
Yeah.
While they're checking
Indeed.
on that, let me look here. We got
Trevor, say
my
something,
first
man.
note
We're picking up
was about 3 minutes in. So let's get to the first issue.
You're good, Trevor.
Yeah, we're good, man.
We're
You
professionals.
can go ahead and turn it off. All right, so here's my first issue with the fella.
Is that he was given the most trustworthy position of all the disciples. This guy was the treasurer. He controlled the money. Okay, he was the treasurer. He controlled the money, which means that Jesus and the other disciples thought he was the most trustworthy person and could be depended on more than anybody else in the group. And I'm sure with Jesus being the head honcho, he approved and selected Judas as the most trustworthy person who would do what was in the interest of the group and in the interest of Jesus Christ.
All right, well, let's check that with the Bible. So let's see here. Give me just a moment. We're going to find the right story. All right, let's see. Yes, here we go. This is John chapter 12, boys and girls. Then Jesus, 6 days before the Passover, came to Bethany where Lazarus was, which had been dead, whom he raised from the dead. There they made him a supper, and Martha served, but Lazarus was one of them that sat at the table with him. Then took Mary a pound of ointment of, I'm not going to try to say that word, very costly and anointed perfume of some kind, and anointed, it was a very costly perfume, and she anointed the feet of Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the odor of the ointment. Then saith one of the disciples, Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, which should betray him. Why was this ointment sold for 300 pence and given to the poor? This he said, not that he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief, and had the bag, and bear what was put therein. So he already had a reputation for being a thief and stealing from the bag. So no, he was not a trustworthy fella. So that's like 100% factually inaccurate. They knew he was a sleazeball. So I just want to point that out right from the beginning. No, that's not how that went down. So that's point number one. Let's see if I can find the other point.
Isn't there a story about all the apostles like that, though? Like, aren't they all sleazeballs?
Well, they did stupid
They all
things.
have their
but-
own like pitfalls, yeah.
Right. They're just, they're
But-
representations
But
of
what's
different
particular with
sins or
Judas is
downfalls.
that he was, what's particular with Judas is that he was the only one that was insistent on not repenting of what he had done and like hiding it deliberately.
Yeah.
Okay.
The rest of their sins were kind of like more just sort of out there for everyone to see. Like Peter's anger, like all the apostles were already like, before Jesus would correct them or chastise them, all of the fellow apostles were already like, hey, chill out, man. Like talking about the guy who drew a sword and cut a guy's ear off. Like, imagine the rest of them probably thought about running away right then and there. Like, okay, we're cooked.
Yeah. So,
But interesting note, real quick. This one's kind of tangential, but it has to do with that woman with the expensive perfume. And this is something that I hadn't really heard about until a couple days ago. Actually, I was listening to somebody talk about it. One of the reasons for the increased scandal,
Got an echo.
like
I think
why
it's
some
from
of the
Jeremiah.
people, Echo for me.
Yeah, because you don't have headphones on.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I used to do this show without headphones, and then I started echoing. So,
Gotcha. I'll start wearing like my little Bluetooth earbuds before I come on.
sweet.
Is it like so bad that you can't understand what I'm saying?
I don't know.
Well, that's all right. Just keep up with your
Let's
thought, and we'll
see,
fix it as we go on.
Wait, now it's everyone.
What?
What?
They're saying it's everyone.
What?
I don't know.
Why?
It's
I'm not a computer nerd. What do I know?
Oh, wait a minute. I think I might know why. Let me try muting something here.
he says it's doubling the voice, not really echoing. It's
Okay.
strange.
All right. Well, ask him if it's still doing it, because I might have fixed it. It might have been me. So.
All right, Jeremiah, talk again.
We'll see.
Hello.
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 Is it good?
Hang on, we're waiting on that intro. Nope, not everyone. Two bottom folks, Cody and Jeremiah. That's what
Okay.
he says.
I don't know, man.
Or is it
Interesting.
Gary
When you
and
two
Jeremiah?
run off and grab my earbuds.
Yeah, go ahead and grab your earbuds and see if that fixes it. So.
I'll be right back.
Yeah, sweet.
Oh, something fixed
Oh, did it fix it?
it.
Oh, this
Expect my check in the mail.
Expect your check in the mail.
Oh, we lost Jeremiah though.
Oh, that's all right. That's
What
okay. Well, while he's getting that ready, so he was going to make a point about the ointment. So let's remember that.
Yep.
I'm going to move on to issue number 2 with our special little individual here.
Special little individual.
The other thing I believe
So-
he got wrong.
You're so compassionate.
Oh, I'm filled with compassion. Man, I think I'm more than patient. I was more than patient with Brandon Biggs. This guy jumped the shark for me. So
You signed up for Brandon Biggs.
I
You're
didn't
the only
sign
one that
up for
believed him.
Brandon Biggs.
Yeah, you
Yes,
still
I was
like him.
willing to give him the benefit of the doubt.
You said
That is not the same thing as going, I believe. I said maybe. I was very non-committal. This guy's full of crap. But all right, let's go on here. Let's see
I
what
love when you get fired up. It makes me laugh.
let's see what our pumpkin has to say.
And let's take a look at it. But in John 13, go to verse 21. When Jesus had thus said, he was troubled in spirit and testified and said, verily. That word verily means I'm telling you the truth. I say unto you that one of you shall betray me. So Jesus is talking to the 12. One of you. So he specifically looks right at them and says, I'm telling you, as we're gathered here, one of you shall betray me. Okay, that's great. And then in verse 25, they say, Lord, who is it? So that's the second question. Who is it that's going to do this? One of you is going to do it. Now, you're sitting around the table with him. Say you're sitting around the table with Jesus, and he says, man, I got some really rank news here. This is going south, and I'm really going to get blown away. And the terrible part about this is that one of you guys is going to do this. So you all look at each other. And one guy leans over and says, who is it? Who is it? Now, look at verse 26. He it is. In other words, it's the guy to whom I shall give a sop when I have dipped it. Okay? Fine. And when he dipped the sop, he gave it to Judas Iscariot, son of Simon. So, who is it? Jesus.
Okay, so another little factual point here. Let's see who actually, who he told this to. Because the sop thing wasn't to the whole group. The sop thing was to one person. And we can go look at each.
So it wasn't in front of everybody. It was like on an individual level.
No, it was to John directly. Like Peter beckons John to talk to Christ, and then John asks him personally who it is, and then Jesus tells John it is who I dip the sop and give it to.
Is he some sort of a pastor or preacher?
Oh, okay.
Bill Donahue? I don't know, man. He
was a preacher just in a small town and got a television program.
Well, he should have done
okay.
his homework a little better. So let's see. Let's move.
Yeah, that's the danger of letting everyone start their own, like Pastor Jim Bob's Bible Church. We just preach the word, according to me.
Well, it gives us lots of wonderful content. So, all right, let's see here. I'm going to try to find this verse really quick. All right, here we go. Now, then the disciples looked at one another, doubting of whom he spake. This is John 13, verse 22. Verse 23. Now there was leaning on Jesus' bosom one of his disciples whom Jesus loved. John always referred to himself as the disciple who Jesus loved. So this was John.
Right.
And Simon Peter therefore beckoned to him that he should ask who it should be of whom he spoke. So Peter goes to John and goes, hey, ask him who it is. And then, so John does so. Then he lying on Jesus' breast, saith unto him, Lord, who is it? Jesus answered, it is he to whom I shall give a sop when I have dipped it. And when he had dipped the sop, he gave it to Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon. So
he only told John that.
And Peter heard him. So two heard this account. This is why the sop detail is mentioned in Mark, because Mark is actually Peter's account. So that's why it's only mentioned in John and Mark, and I don't believe it's mentioned in. It's not mentioned in Luke and Matthew, I believe. So.
Interesting.
Yeah. So,
there is a part in this video where he's like, he definitely says like all the disciples heard him say, "Give the sop." It's to who I give the sop.
Right, and Peter, when you're reading Mark's account, Peter also gives another interesting detail. We can look at it if you don't believe me, but it's in Mark, in the Gospel Passover account of Mark. Peter mentions that Christ was breaking the bread and giving it to different pieces to everybody. So it's like he's in the middle of breaking bread. Then John asks him what's going on. Then Christ gives that one piece of bread to Judas, which is why nobody else caught on, because he had been, prior to him making the statement, he'd been giving bread to everybody. He'd already been breaking the bread up. So
gotcha.
That's how interesting. That's how the rest of them didn't know. So, and I know this very well because for 6 months, for a period of 2 years, nearly every night for 6 months, I was either John or Judas in the Passion Play. And so I reenacted this scene over and over and over again. So I'm fairly familiar with this sequence. So
you enjoyed dipping the sop?
I didn't enjoy dipping the sop. We didn't get real bread. You can't leave real bread outside in like the hollers of Missouri. That ain't gonna last very long. So.
Oh, there's this Passion Play my church used to put on when I was, church is actually right down the road for me growing up as a kid. And I can't remember the name of the guy, but when I was a kid, I used to make fun of him ruthlessly, and I still feel bad about it to this day because he got casted as Judas in the Passion Play this year. And I razzed him about it so bad. And, he's a grown man, so he took it in stride for a while, right? But at one point, I made a joke right before the play started. He's like, "Oh, how's it going, Judas?" And he's like, "Yeah, that's super funny." And then he just sort of turned around and went outside for some fresh air. And I was like, "Oh, he probably really doesn't like this role." Now I feel bad. I wouldn't want to play Judas either, man.
I did play Judas. Ironically, I played Judas and John for 2 years. So
bad intro said, I could never understand the minds of those in the moment. It would be mind-blowing that someone would realize that he is God, and then God tells you, "You're going to betray me." And you sit there and go, "Okay." I would be like, no.
Yeah, well, they were wondering who it was, and this actually gets to the next point. So that was a very good segue, bad intro. Thank you. Let's see if I can get to the right spot. So, yes, this should be the last detail, I believe, that I really wanted to harp on that was factually inaccurate. So,
I mean, it probably hurt to be told that, you're going to betray me by Christ. But also remember that St. Peter was actually called the devil by Christ at one point when Christ was prophesying his own execution. "Get behind me, Satan." Satan? That would burn.
Yeah.
Now
That would burn.
Yeah.
Just imagine Hyde from that 70s show just popping up.
So what was your analogy about the ointment? We got thrown off
yeah,
by the
yeah.
echoing thing. So while I'm getting this next part ready, if you wouldn't mind going over that ointment thing.
Yeah, so the woman with the expensive perfumes that cleans, wipes Jesus's feet with her hair. One of the reasons why this would have been so scandalous to any practicing Jew that witnessed it, besides the fact that this woman is like using her hair to wipe Jesus's feet, is the fact that her hair isn't covered. Like, she's in the presence of very religious Jews with uncovered hair. So that's already scandalous right out the gate. And then she uses her uncovered hair to wipe Jesus's feet. So this probably, has absolutely floored everybody who witnessed it.
Yeah.
So for Christ to just be like, yep, because he's probably just seeing this human being like totally abase herself in front of him and just being like, in a way, part of me thinks that he was probably sitting there thinking like, she gets it. She knows who I am.
Yeah, and that's what he says that something to that effect in Matthew, but we'll get to that here in a second. I wanted to, apparently my timestamps failed me, but I think I'm pretty close anyway. So we're going to watch what he says here next, and I'll stop whenever it gets to the right spot.
Says, it's the one who I give, when I dip the sop, I give the sop. And he gives the sop to Judas. That's pretty clear, isn't it? Pretty clear as to what had happened. One of you is going to betray me. Who is it? It's the guy, when I dip the sop, I give the sop to, who is it? Judas. He gives the sop to Judas. Now, in verse 27, after the sop, Satan entered into him. Interesting. Not before. Not before. After. And that's very important. Satan was not in him. In other words, he didn't have this cornball idea before.
Yes, he did. He had this cornball idea before. It was about a week before, to be exact. If you will turn to me to Matthew chapter 26, we shall read. So, and it came to pass, when Jesus had finished these sayings, he said unto his disciples, okay, maybe I hope I'm right. Yeah, no, I'm right. Okay. Then assembled together the chief priests and the scribes and the elders of the people unto the place of the high priest, who was called Caiaphas, and they consulted that they might take Jesus by subtlety and kill him. So, the priests are already looking for a way to kill Christ. But they said, not on the feast day, lest the people be an uproar among the people. Now, when Jesus was in Bethany, so we're moving on to a different scene. This is the same scene that we read at the beginning of John, when we first read John. This is the same incident with the ointment. So, now when Jesus was in Bethany, in the house of Simon the leper, there came unto him a woman having an alabaster box of very precious ointment, and poured it on his head, as he sat at meat. And when his disciples saw it, they had indignation, saying, to what purpose is this waste? So in this account, we've got a group. But it's actually Judas who speaks up from the group, so that's important. For this ointment might have been sold for much and given to the poor. When Jesus understood it, he said unto them, why trouble ye the woman? For she hath wrought a good work upon me. For ye have the poor always with you, but me ye have not always. For in that she hath poured this ointment on my body, she did it for my burial. Verily I say unto you, whosoever this gospel shall be preached in the whole world, there shall also this that this woman hath done be told for a memorial of her. Then one of the 12, called Judas Iscariot, went unto the chief priests. So, the chief priests are looking for a way to kill Christ. Judas gets rebuked by Christ in Bethany, and because he's mad, he goes to the high priests. So he had this he has this idea a week before the Passover.
What does it say he said to the priests?
All right, well, you want to keep on. Let's see here. Where to go? And he said unto them, what will ye give me? And I will deliver him unto you. And they coveted with him for 30 pieces of silver. And from that time on, he sought opportunity to betray him. So, he made a deal after the incident in Bethany, a week before the Passover. So yes, he had the cornball idea before. And so when Christ says, verily, verily, one of you is going to betray me, Judas isn't going, who is it? Judas is going, oh crap, I'm caught. So that's how that went down.
Okay.
The an interesting thought that I had. This isn't coming from like anything that I can point to in Orthodox writings or anything like that. I'm sure there's some people who've reflected on it, but the fact that after Judas has, the bread, dipped in the wine, that the devil enters into him after that, it brings to mind kind of like a reverse of the Lord's Supper, a reverse of the Eucharist.
Mm-hmm.
So like Christ tells us that we need his body and his blood in order to inherit eternal life. But Judas is here with the bread and the wine, the body, or not the body and the blood, but the bread and the wine of betrayal, and he receives the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Like he receives eternal condemnation for the supper that he has chosen to take part in.
Yeah, I think that sop was definitely like the final choice. The impression that I get from it is Christ is repeatedly reaching out to him, saying, you don't have to do this, you don't have to do this, you don't have to do this. But when he takes that sop, that's when his decision's finally made, and that's when Satan enters into him. Like there was something final about that moment where his choice is finally made for real. And he's committed at that point.
I would think it would be like a representation of pride or hubris. Like, oh, I got the sop. Like,
well, I think
I'm the specialist boy, right? So he trusts me, and so it's like pride, and so that swells your ego, and the devil enters in.
I don't know what he was thinking, because Christ immediately leans in and goes, "Do what thou doest, do quickly," And Judas already had this plan, and he knows that Christ knows about his plan, and he still goes and does it.
Right, because he thought Christ was going to pull some Christ, magic and disappear or whatever.
I don't think that's what it was, because he
the
got
whole plan was to overthrow the establishment.
See, I would say I would agree with you if it wasn't.
That's what they all wanted for sure.
Yeah, you're right. Like that's what they wanted at the time, and I would
Judas
be inclined.
Was the only one with enough hubris to follow through with that.
I would be inclined to agree with you, but the scripture says, or at least heavily implies, that he was humiliated when Christ said, "Leave her alone." And this seems to be something that he did in reaction to being humiliated in Bethany.
That's what separates Judas from the rest of the apostles, because when the rest of the apostles are chastised, they, are wounded in their heart and they repent. But when Judas is chastised, he commits like the ultimate betrayal against the Son of Man.
Yeah, he gets mad and he doubles down. The others are contrite and humble, and then he gets mad and doubles down, going, "Well, I'll show you, And then only after the damage is done does he go, "Oh crap, I really screwed up here."
Right.
So it's pride.
And then instead of repenting of his ultimate betrayal after he's like, "Oh, I've ultimately screwed up here," he could have repented, right? Like, because Peter denied Christ 3 times and still reported to, his contemporaries, like, "I've done this horrible thing." But he sees the resurrected Christ and he's forgiven and he repents. Judas, instead of seeking that repentance and that forgiveness, he goes out into the valley of blood, so named because of him, and hangs himself. So instead of repentance, he chooses to off himself.
But like
ultimate tragedy.
Would a guy that is like proud of himself for betraying, somebody for money kill himself? I mean, like he was obviously tore up over what he did.
Yeah, he was very, very tore up.
Yeah, he was upset.
And there's probably, because of his deal with Christ's betrayers, and because of the Gospel's account of, attesting to the fact that like an evil spirit, like the devil, like entered him, he was probably being tortured in the same manner that people possessed would be tortured as well, like being assaulted by evils. That's why, like, if you've seen, Mel Gibson's, The Passion, like it actually kind of, I hadn't really thought about it until I had seen that movie for the first time. But, obviously Hollywood is Hollywood. They'll depict things how they want, dramatically so. But there's probably a bit of truth to that. Like he was probably being, a victim of like all kinds of different hallucinations and internal voices telling and stuff. And it just drove him crazy to the point of death. Like his own guilt and his, communion with evil spirits at that time.
Right, dude. Yeah, that's what I'm always saying. Like your thoughts are demons, man.
They're whispered.
Yeah, that's like wicked thoughts that just sort of like you know, everybody has experience with it, like thoughts that kind of just occur to you that are like really, really messed up, and you know it didn't come from you. Like you're right. You know,
Yeah.
Yep.
like a lot of the times, you know, sometimes wicked thoughts will be in you because you've allowed that passion to grow, to do wicked things, like a particular sin or something like that. It'll become ingrained in you and it'll start to mess with you. But a lot of the time, these thoughts are originally in the form of darts hurled at you by the enemy, fly
Yeah.
through your mind,
See that?
and the choice you have to make is to not dialogue with that thought.
Yes.
This is a stupid analogy, but I always this is a stupid analogy, but I always imagine a demon throwing like an evil thought in the form of a baseball into my head. But anyway,
Yeah.
so
You just, that would be something that like a Southern Baptist pastor is, brother, when that baseball comes through your mind, you don't reach back up and catch that ball. You're gonna fly over your head, brother.
That's funny.
yeah, you're spot on. I won't deny that. So, okay, where was I at? Oh yeah, by the way, I didn't timestamp this, but he also says 30 pieces of silver is a little bit of money. That wasn't a little bit of money. It was enough to buy a field. Because from what I understand of the lore after the fact, Judas hung himself after he'd thrown the money at the priest, but they couldn't put the money back in the temple because it was blood money. So what they did is they bought a field, but it just so happens to be the field that Judas hung himself in, and they found Judas's body later. So it's kind of like a interesting tie back. But the 30 pieces of silver was enough to buy a field, so it wasn't a little bit of money. So anyway,
Yeah.
so there's that.
That intro said there is a possession that is worse than demonic, being possessed by your passion that needs no external intervention, or deadlier. Judas had the passion of greed and needed nothing but himself to do so. The devil entering him, to me, is the moment where possession to fulfill the betrayment of God was game over.
Very good, I believe.
Yeah, he had basically been offering permission over the course of a long time.
Yeah.
You know, like people might say like tacitly or not, that he was doing this, but through his actions, like through continually stealing from the purse, among other things that he was likely engaging in, other sinful things, like he was giving evil spirits like permission basically to continue harassing him, to continue coming after him.
Yeah, that's what we
It's
all
like
do
when
on
you-
a daily basis.
Yeah, when you deliberately sin and you keep doing it instead of repenting, you are basically communing with demons.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're either being controlled by your thoughts, which are demons, or you're being present and taking every moment as it comes, which is God.
Yeah. So, my point is, this guy got all the little details wrong, like all of them, and he has a very annoying overweight cat, too, which I feel the audience is required to see.
Dude, the cat's funny, man. You got to play that whole ending though if you're gonna make fun of him for the cat.
Okay, I will play it
You gotta
for
let
you.
him. You,
Can you
gotta let
hear
him.
the overweightedness in like the cat's meow? Like, meow.
Yeah, you can. You actually can. It's fantastic. It made me so happy.
But
It's
It
I think
made the
he's
video
got a
work.
couple of videos with that cat in it.
I think I should put it into context for
I
chat.
agree with client and
All
start
right,
time
hang on a
tracking.
minute.
Great. So for
Sorry.
Q4, I was thinking.
What
we
are you
should-
doing?
Oh,
Listening
we
to
needed
ads.
up
Listen
this
to
message for you. But you know, it gives me an opportunity to do something. And a lot of you folks that are around along the network
Yeah, here it
haven't
is.
seen Prissy. Been a
This
long
is
time. Must
special.
have seen some of the, those A, B, C, and D tapes. But other than that,
Actually, before we do that, Trevor, you said you're going to say something? Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to put it into context
Yeah.
just for chat.
Tee it off
last
for
week,
us.
Last week when we ran this, I cut it off early because I didn't think anybody would be interested in the cat. So now we're playing
Just
that part.
comment section, one after the other in all caps. Cat, where's the cat?
We want the cat. So,
If we
you
had
don't get a
listeners,
chance
yeah.
to see the old girl. She's put on so much weight. Priss, there's a bunch of people on the network. You want to say hello? Yes. You glad to see everybody? What do you think of Frank? Well, anyhow, but you know, there's a lot of no wait. There's a lot of people I haven't seen you for a long time. She's not in the mood today, folks. But she just Chrissy sends her love. There you go.
That made this video worth it.
Yeah.
That cat's going, I know you're a false prophet. Put me down. So. All right. So I guess we'll watch the rest of it. Are you wanting to watch the rest of the end, Cody? Is that what you're getting at?
I mean, he kind of wraps his point up, I think, and
All
so
right.
you get a good
Okay.
concession.
We will watch until Cody tells us to stop. And just bear in mind, everything this man has said from a factual standpoint has been wrong, except for the colostrum being Santa Claus. That was just incoherent. I had no idea what he was talking about when he said that.
What?
Colostrum is Santa Claus. Get it? Colostrum, claws, they're practically the same thing.
Pretty much.
I had
You just
no
hear
idea.
like the X-Files music pop up.
I had no idea what he was talking about when he said that. I was like, okay.
That's why he wants the milk left out in your
Milk and cookies, get it? It's all coming together. So, all right, here we
Send your
go.
love. But we were doing the program about Judas, and something went wrong with the tape machine. So I said, well, we have to get back to the studio and continue it. And so let's just pick up from there, okay? And then there'll be another program on after this one. And I just appreciate having you on the network and putting up with this. But let's get back to that point where we were, where Judas believed really what Christians believe today. In other words, that Jesus was going to set up a physical kingdom on the earth. And, you know, he says, hey, let me go do it. You know, I'm picked out to do this. This is a big deal. But you say, well, you know, where would he get off of thinking such a thing? Well, if you remember in the Bible, that thought also entered into Jesus' head. If you look in Matthew chapter 4 and verse 8, what does it say there? Matthew chapter 4, verse 8. It said, and the devil takes him up into an exceeding high mountain and shows him all the kingdoms of the world and the glory of them. Well, what that's saying to you is that the devil taking him up to a high mountain means his ego got the best of him. He was thinking he was a big shot. So,
That is absolute nonsense.
Keep listening.
What? Why
Can't cut
would
him
you
off like
think
that.
that? Why would you think that? Oh, this didn't really happen. This was his ego getting the better. Then explain to me the bread thing. What does the bread represent?
You can't pull two different meanings from one scripture.
No, not like that.
Come on,
Not
dude.
if it's a historical event that actually happened.
Just keep listening.
All right. I'll keep listening. Goodness gracious.
that's what that's trying to tell you. And he thought of all the kingdoms of the world. In other words, his mind started focusing on what he could get. His mind started focusing on, hey, wait a minute, I don't really need this. You know, I can do better on the outside than I can on the inside. And so he had at one time, according to scriptures and according to the story, had some ideas of a material kingdom. So it wasn't out of line that Judas might have thought that. So Judas obviously thought.
The only thing he's gotten right is that the Jews actually did think it was going to be a physical kingdom at that time. Like,
And they still do.
Yeah, and they still do.
All Orthodox Jews still believe that, yeah.
Yeah. So that's like the only detail that's accurate. Other than that, this is special. But anyway.
That he was helping Jesus to put into motion this power that would overthrow the law, you know, the government, and set up his physical kingdom on earth. And you know, you can't blame Judas for that, simply because it's
Yes, I can, and I do.
exactly what all the Christians believe today. They never think of a spiritual kingdom. They don't understand that Jesus was talking about a spiritual kingdom, not a physical kingdom, see? But what Judas figured was this would force Jesus' hand. And I mean, Jesus had set this all up with the pass and the sop and all this business, that Jesus had set all of this up so that he could demonstrate his power and set up his kingdom on the earth. Now,
Except that he decided to betray them after being humiliated in Bethany, but okay.
remember the 30 pieces of silver. That's a
Say something, or you want to say something, Cody, because I'm just going to be more and more petty as this goes on. So,
No. No, you're fine.
Okay, all right. Well, as long as we'll humor my pettiness, I guess we'll continue.
Small amount. Actually, what that represents is the 30 degrees in the constellation Scorpio. But
What is that? 30
What?
degrees in the
Hold on.
constellation is Scorpio.
What? Go back.
Okay, so the 30 pieces of silver aren't 30 pieces of silver. They are 30 pieces in the constellation of Scorpio. You're
Yeah,
the
that
William
makes sense.
Donahue. How does that make sense?
It's
Explain it. Explain it. What is this? What is this
because
constellation
all
thing?
these stories are written in the stars. That's what they mean when they say written in the stars. It's like
What?
the story is like Scorpio is Judas. The scorpion stings his own back. It's like so there's 30 stars in the constellation Scorpio. There's 30 degrees or whatever he said. There's 30 degrees in every constellation.
It sounds like this Mr. Donahue fella perhaps was sitting at a bar one night before he recorded this, and then he met like a goth chick who was like, I think you're a Sagittarius. And he was like, I don't know, maybe I am. And he was like super into her and maybe a little bit of what she thought about horoscopes and stuff.
There's 30 degrees in every constellation. There's 360 degrees in the sky, right?
You got to give us some background information. I'm starting from zero
trying
here. Okay, so you're saying, okay, where is this? Like, what is he pulling? Is this like a sacred text? Is this science? Is this like a doctrine
No,
of
it's
astrology? Like, what is
how I
this?
say these stories always repeat themselves?
I understand that from like a Carl Jungian collective subconscious standpoint, but what does that have to do with astrology?
These stories are written in the stars, and archetypes here on Earth fill the roles of those stories and play them out in the physical realm. Well, they play out in the heavenly realm in the stars.
Okay.
But they have to happen here over and over.
Why?
So, because that's just how the place works.
Where is he pulling this from? Like, is this a religion? Is this his own thing?
This is all religions.
No, I can safely say this is not a part of Christianity at all. So it
Well,
can't
if you
be
know
all
how to
religion.
see it.
Oh, well,
Revelation's
yes.
full
If
of
you
it.
squint your eyes and believe that it's there,
No,
you
Revelation
can
is
see it.
full of this stuff.
Where?
Okay, so hold on. So for the 30 pieces of silver, you're saying there's this constellation. Which constellation did you say it was? Sagittarius?
Scorpio.
Scorpio is the story of Judas.
Okay. So that's a major one in scripture. What constellation represents the crucifixion, burial, and resurrection? Is there one for that? Like, I'm not being snarky right now. Like,
I'm sure there is. I don't know all of this,
about?
but right now he's specifically referring to, like, there's 12 constellations. There's 12 30-degree segments in the sky. Christ and the 11 apostles make up the sky clock, if you want to call it that.
Do these individual degrees or whatever represent like individual components? Or are they all like a giant amount? Like, do all 30 of them mean betrayal? Like, does coin 1 mean something distinct from coin 2? Like, I don't understand.
That I don't know.
Yeah, I don't understand this. So I'm baffled.
It's hard to understand a lot of it, but I mean, you get the basic concept out of it.
The reason I would have to do a lot more looking into this to, get the context for it is because, there's 30 of a lot of things,
Yeah.
like there's 30 stars in that one constellation you're talking about, but there's also 30 items in who knows however many other created categories in the world, but not all of them, are meant to prophesy something.
Well, you also have to,
the one thing I will give as like a small concession, not me saying like I buy this like hook, line, and sinker, but one thing I will say is that the stars, were created by God, they were lit by God, and they were arranged in specific patterns. So like, there's significance to that. So there's a lot more significance to, the stars, which most ancient religions looked at as like actual angelic beings.
The stars were placed there for signs and seasons. These are the signs that it talks about.
Yeah. No, I agree with, okay, I'll concede that for the sake of that verse. I'll also add that the Magi knew that Christ was going to be born in Bethlehem because of stars. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, that there is
What
some
was his
sort of...
name? Sarkumon?
Saru.
Remember his name? The guy who the magician who saw the the star and sent the wise men to it?
I don't think that name is mentioned in Scripture. There might be a tradition that gives the guy's name, but or
Okay.
some sort of text, but I wouldn't know what it is. So,
All right.
The fact that the wise men were obviously, they weren't Jews,
yeah,
but they are an instance in Scripture which may have compelled somebody like Saint Justin Martyr, for instance, to talk about the his idea of the spermaticos logos, like the seeds of the word. His idea that there's like little bits of truth tucked into every religion, and it doesn't make these religions completely true, but it
Right.
means that there's bits of truth in them, and they lack their wholeness because they're missing Christ.
well,
So God might have used like a true aspect of what these wise men already believed in a spiritual context.
yeah.
And
Satan also uses Scripture. A good lie has just a beat of truth in it. So, or rather, a good lie is 99.
That's why.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, that's why all other religions are incomplete, is because they have bits of truth, but they deliberately lack Christ. Or nowadays in modern religions, you look at, a lot of Buddhists think that Christ was like another incarnation of the Buddha, and Islam even has like so high of a view that they say that he is in fact the Jewish Messiah. He did in fact ascend into heaven. He will administer the final judgment, but he's not the Son of God. But he's not, incarnate God. So like,
yeah,
in order for a lie to be believable, it's like that adage goes, like if a lie is to be believed, it has to have lots of truth sprinkled in it.
Right. So let's, for the sake of argument, concede the stars thing, that there are patterns being represented in the sky that happen, what would you say, Cody, on a seasonal basis?
Yeah, I would call it that. I mean, it's
Okay.
probably not seasons that we're thinking of,
But cyclical to some capacity.
yes.
Okay. So
even secular philosophy accounts for this phenomenon about history repeating itself. People like David Hume, the atheist Scottish philosopher, they refer to it as the law of induction, I believe, and it's talking about history repeating itself over and over again. In fact, that same secular version of history repeating itself, that's propagated by people like Hume. That is actually one of his only things that he says under an atheistic worldview. I cannot justify this. The law of induction, history repeating itself.
Mhm.
I have absolutely nothing within my logical framework that can justify why this happens. It's something I cannot explain. And he actually challenges other atheists with that too. He's like, somebody has to come up with a better explanation for this than I can, because I can't think of one.
Yeah.
Bad intro.
So you'll hear a lot of Christian apologists bring that up.
Sorry.
Bad intro. Sad. The understanding is that they were Zoroastrianists.
Ooh.
The word,
Zoroastrians.
Oh,
the
okay.
word magus
Magi.
comes from the Old Persian word magus, Iranian priestly caste of Zoroastrianism, which forbade sorcery, and the Magi were likely astronomers and astrologers. Thanks, Google.
That makes a lot of sense, because Zoroastrianism is actually monotheistic as well. They only believe in one God.
So maybe he's getting this
So-
from Zoroastrianism. Okay.
Yeah, so that would make a lot of sense. That's something that I should look more into. But yeah, Zoroastrianism, it seems like especially their framework of monotheism would have allowed for a lot less, kind of faulty ritual, and more of like a very central belief structure that didn't really allow for like the development of a lot of pagan rituals.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. All right.
So perhaps God could have used somebody in that kind of structure to, lead them in the right direction.
Okay, so we're going to argue that there's plausibility to the stars thing on the ground of patterns in history. Is that a fair summation of where we're going with this?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Okay. All right, so that's point number one. Let's see what else he says. Actually, I forget I switched scenes. Okay, here we go.
We'll talk to you about that another time, but that's what that is. That's zodiacal. The 30 pieces of silver comes out of Zechariah,
Zodiacal.
and it symbolizes the 30 degrees in the constellation Scorpio.
The 30 pieces, I was actually doing some research because I knew he was going to mention Zechariah. That 30 pieces is actually regarded as a messianic prophecy, which I would agree with. So, yeah.
Another case of history repeating itself.
Well, he prophesied it.
How do you make prophecy? You make prophecy based on cycles.
Or the Almighty told you about it.
Okay.
I mean, either one. So,
You say so.
Yeah, a lot of
What do you mean if I
prophecy
say-
in the Old Testament is literally somebody being caught up in God's divine counsel and God like telling them what to say, what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Moses
I
being
think
the
they were a lot
primary
more in
example
touch with the
that
cycles back then, though, as well.
Well, let's just read it, because I don't think he was reading the stars. Let me see here. Then I took my staff, called favor, and broke it, revoking the covenant I had made with all the nations. And then this would be the Abrahamic, or the Levitical covenant, I imagine. It was revoked on that day, and so the oppressed of the flock who were watching me knew it was the word of the Lord. So I told them, if you think it best, give me my pay, but if not, keep it. So they paid me 30 pieces of silver. And the Lord said to me, throw it to the potter, the handsome price at which they valued me. So I took the 30 pieces of silver and threw them to the potter at the house of the Lord. So, yeah, this is like part of a larger prophecy where he's breaking a staff to, like, symbolize certain things. So he breaks the staff, and that's the revoking of the covenant. I'm going to assume, well, no, it can't be the Levitical covenant because it says all the nations, not just the nation of Israel. So I don't know what covenant's being referred to, but a covenant's being broken. That's the first time it breaks the staff. And then the second staff, called union, breaking the family bond between Judah and Israel. Now that's the civil war between Judah and Israel that eventually took place. So, yeah. So it's in reference to a larger prophecy. And one of these aspects of the prophecy is something that involves all the nations, a revoking of a covenant with all the nations. I'm not sure what that is. And then the second staff is the civil war between Judah and Israel. I'm pretty confident that's what that's referring to. So,
does any of that track? I don't understand. What are you talking about?
I'm just saying what I'm reading in the text. I'm letting somebody else infer what that means with the statement of the stars and the cycle and stuff. I'm just trying to understand what the scripture's referring to.
Yeah, so this wouldn't really speak so much to the stars necessarily, but it's saying that it's, I guess you could say it's like not just in the stars, obviously. Like this exact betrayal with like certain particular details was prophesied in the Old Testament, like that passage, Zechariah 11:12-13. Then I said to them, what you just read, if it seems good to you, give me my wages, but if not, keep them. And they weighed out as my wages 30 pieces of silver, the 30 pieces of silver that was given to Judas to betray Christ.
Well,
so like even particular aspects of the betrayal are found within the Old Testament.
Yeah. Well, this is just curious. What do you think, Jeremiah? Do you think this covenant thing is the Levitical covenant? Because this is obviously a messianic prophecy, but I don't know what this first covenant would be. If it's not breaking the Levitical covenant in favor of Christ, what other covenant could it be?
What's the passage again?
This is Zechariah 11, verse 10. I'm sorry, I'm nerding out. I'm like, well, what does that mean? This isn't tied to what you're talking about, Cody. This is just me being a nerd. So, sorry.
Cool.
We might be doing a goose chase here, but I'm curious for Jeremiah's thoughts.
This might be something that like I have to read a little bit more on before I just like start, pulling a Kamala and word salading. Like, okay, so the Old Covenant, right?
We can do this
in
together.
the covenant. That was old. Yeah,
there was a covenant.
I may have to do research.
It was when I worked at McDonald's.
Maybe we just need to do more research on that later, but that's kind of interesting to me because, this is obviously a messianic prophecy, but what's that first covenant? That's kind of making me scratch my head. Because I would think
it might be in reference to what St. Paul was talking about. I can't remember his exact verbiage, but he spoke about the old covenant not being sufficient to save, but rather to condemn or something like. So maybe he's not. It's kind of using hyperbole to talk about like the covenant's not being entirely abrogated or destroyed, because there's still a promise there, but it's being, it's not going to be enough to actually save you. Something else has to be done, like an ultimate fulfillment has to be accomplished.
Mm-hmm. So maybe
that might be in reference to that.
Okay.
But, that's just like after about 15 seconds of thoughts.
No, I know. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I was just like, well, that's interesting. I wonder what that means.
It's interesting. I wanted to look at that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Cody. That was me being a nerd for a second. So
you're cool, bro.
Okay. We can go back to Donahue now. All right. Here we go.
So Judas wound up then totally misunderstanding Jesus' purpose. And his plan failed, even though he thought that he had Jesus' permission. This guy really took a bum rap, But did his plan fail? How else could the great demonstration be fulfilled in this story unless someone or something inside of you plays the role to betray the flesh and set you free? There's got to be something that pushes you over the brink, that says, I'm turning off to this, and I'm giving myself up. I'm sacrificing myself so I can raise myself out of this existence and up into the higher realms. And you can sometimes go back into the book of Genesis. In Genesis 4.
Did he just say something? Because I didn't understand a word of that.
He's talking about separating your spiritual mind from your flesh mind.
Okay.
So he's talking about like meditation. So when you go into meditation, you have to like drop all your thoughts, right? And so you turn your thoughts into Judas, I think is what he's saying. And so you're betraying your mind, because like your mind wants to think, right? Because like, how hard it is to get rid of your thoughts, right?
Yeah.
Right. So it's like you have to betray your flesh to meditate.
So you have to betray your flesh. Wait a minute.
So because your brain is always like, oh, you need to eat. Oh, you need to smoke. Oh, you need to
like
do
you
something.
really try to buckle down and pray. You always get those thoughts that will want to make you think about literally anything else besides what you're doing.
So
and it's all
that's why orthodoxy
like
will have you meditate. Yeah, like orthodoxy will have you meditate on specific prayers in order to accomplish that. In order to kind of push out worldly thoughts, so you can actually focus on, praying to God. That's why, like, the primary prayer of the Orthodox that actually has a lot of, theology packed into it is just called the Jesus Prayer. And it's just, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. So you're recognizing a bunch of different facts about Christ in that prayer, and you're repeating it over and over and over while you pray, not as a vain repetition, but so that you can really lock in and focus on the meaning behind that prayer. You're saying, Lord Jesus Christ, you're recognizing Jesus Christ is Lord. Have mercy on me. You're asking for mercy, not just in a forgiveness context, but in a everything good from God. I want that. That's what you're doing when you're asking for his mercy. And then you say, have mercy on me, a sinner. You're recognizing your sinful state before God. So you're meditating on the aspects of that prayer in order to, push out all the other garbage. Like, you're hungry, you have to go to the bathroom, like your kid's in the other room making a bunch of noise, like all this different kind of stuff. So, and that comes from a very early Jewish precedent as well. They would have the same kind of meditative prayers. St. Paul was part of a Pharisaical tradition that focused a lot on meditative prayers.
Luke 1:9 has a bit of a hack in it. It says, I don't know what it says, but it talks about burning incense while entering the temple, right? So it's like because it's so hard to get rid of all your thoughts and not think about anything, you light that incense and you can concentrate on that smell, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you don't have to think about anything, but you're still kind of occupying your mind.
Right. That's why early worship, like Jewish worship and early Christian worship, it engaged all of the senses. Like even our prayer corners at home, Orthodox are encouraged to have like an incense. We have candles that we light, but there's also, because when you light incense, even while you pray at home, what does it do? It takes your mind right back to the church. So like that, if you're experiencing that peace while you pray at church, then having that incense, like I didn't realize it until my priest gave me some of the church's incense after I first set up my prayer corner. He's like, here you go, my gift to you. And the first time I used it when I was in prayer at home, like it brought my mind right back to the church, and I was able to forget about everything else for a few minutes.
That's kind of cool. Yeah. So you're tricking your brain. You're Judasing your brain.
So wait a minute. Are we supposed to be embracing the Judas figure or betraying the Judas figure?
Yes, you should You should love all.
I wasn't
like
necessarily speaking to that analogy necessarily. I was just.
You should empathize about the Judas aspect of yourself.
What is it? Empathize? Like feel sorry for it? Like you little idiot?
Yeah.
Okay. How does that translate to meditation?
Because your thoughts are little idiots, and you tell them.
Yeah. So by that analysis, though, you'd be killing the Judas, right? Like you'd be rejecting the flesh, you'd be killing the Judas, right? By that analogy. Like, because I got the impression that he was wanting us to like embrace the Judas, so the Judas would kill itself. That was the impression I got at the end of the film.
Because the story has to finish itself. Because the story has to happen. The cycle has to happen within you.
I'm stupid, Cody. I don't know what that means.
Dude, the Jesus story, like Jesus had to die to break karma. I mean, that's my reason. But Jesus had to die, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so the story had to take place. There is a Judas aspect of yourself that you can take from the story.
Okay, well, A, if Judas hadn't done it, somebody else would. But B, so we're talking about like the flesh, though. Like when he's saying Judas, he means flesh. Like more broadly.
No, he's saying Judas. Judas is the one that betrayed the flesh, so that Jesus could connect to the spiritual realm, like so the whole process could connect, right?
I think the whole thing about betraying your own thoughts, like Judasing your own thoughts, that by itself could be semi-useful as a teaching kind of metaphor. But I think my problem with it is that he asserts that there is like an absolute spiritual context to that. Like he's applying like a scriptural meaning to like, this is exactly what this is. As a matter of fact, like, I don't know if you can say that. It seems like there's a lot of, he had a thought that he thought was really, really cool and made a lot of sense. And then he kind of just like crammed it into the book.
Well, I mean, he didn't get smote or anything, so.
No, because not every heretic gets
smote. His cat wanted to smite him, that's for sure.
Yeah, his cat did smite him. You saw him reach up and like that.
What are you doing, you false prophet? No, let's
right before it ran outside and had a small Newport.
That intro had a good question.
Yeah, go for it.
Is this guy, meaning Donahue, insinuating that God made Judas betray him?
I think he's insinuating fatalism, which I wouldn't agree with. Now, I do think that Judas might have been positioned from like a foreknowledge. And a wee bit of Calvinism, yeah. So I think he might have been positioned based on foreknowledge, perhaps, but that's not the same thing as saying Judas is fated to betray Christ. Otherwise, Christ wouldn't have given him multiple opportunities to turn back. So, I mean, that's the whole point of saying one of you is going to betray me, but not just outing Judas. he's letting Judas know, I know what you're up to, and he's giving him an out.
Yeah.
So I don't think
kind of tangential here, but I think this is where, and I'm not going to go on a whole diatribe about Calvinism right now. I just think that this is an interesting point.
Yeah.
This is where Calvinism, begins, and also where it screws up, is because it'll take instances like this where, like, well, the son of perdition was prophesied, this betrayal was prophesied, so somebody had to do it, and Christ knew who was going to betray him, and it ended up being Judas. That means that Judas must have, he was chosen to do this particular thing. So they'll see that, and then they'll be like, well, this all has to make sense how God chooses in his foreknowledge who's going to do what. So rather than accepting that for the mystery it is that humans can't comprehend, they'll build a whole systematic theology out of it. And it ends up basically becoming the entire religion. Is like, this is how God operates in his sovereignty. They'll insist on all of these different passages. This proves this aspect, like the T in tulip. This proves the L in tulip. But it's God's sovereignty and how the fate of mankind shakes out within particular, like, individual humans. That's not for us to know. Like, we're not supposed to be able to figure out how God does that. He's outside of time, space, and matter. We cannot comprehend what that is like. We don't know how things work in that realm.
But we can easily infer that fate isn't a thing, because even in the Old Testament, prophecies change. Now, there are certain things that have to happen, but that doesn't mean they have to happen in an exact particular way, that there is some ambiguity to prophecy. So, for example, Israel was meant to be destroyed at one period of time earlier in the Old Testament. Forgive me, I don't know the scriptures off the top of my head. But because they repented, God delayed that destruction 70 years. Another example is Hezekiah and Isaiah. Hezekiah was meant to die at a certain time. Hezekiah begged to be spared, and God spared Hezekiah, even though that was part of the original prophecy that he die. So God does change things around based on how people react to prophecies, even if certain things are destined to happen. That doesn't mean they have to happen exactly the same way. There can be variations.
Right.
So,
like Nineveh was supposed to be destroyed, and that's why Jonah got sent to prophesy to him.
Exactly.
Prophesy to them, and that's why Jonah got all messed up on the inside. Like, he knew that they were going to repent if he prophesied to them.
Yeah.
He knew God was going to be merciful. However, you go to the very next book, and Nahum, Nineveh gets obliterated.
Mm-hmm.
So,
judgment
still came for Nineveh.
Yeah.
You said, like, Nineveh was prophesied to be destroyed, but people destroy themselves, right?
Well, it depends. Sodom and Gomorrah didn't destroy
In their
itself.
sin, yeah, but
sometimes people destroy themselves. Other times God throws fire and brimstone.
When you have a whole bunch of those people who are destroying themselves all in one society together, they're basically reaping what they sow when the fire and brimstone comes.
Yeah. Sometimes they destroy themselves. Sometimes God wipes them off the map. Just depends.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Bad and true.
That reminds me. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh,
the harshest reality we need to always remember as Christians, we should not judge Judas for what he did, but like was said earlier, empathize for him because we betray Christ daily for free.
Bingo.
That is a good point.
Bingo.
Yeah, bad intro. This is the Orthodox guy in the comments, right?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, because if he is, then I'm sure, like, he just reminded me that we celebrated the Sunday of the publican and the Pharisee not that long ago. That instance in Scripture where, the Pharisee is like thank God that I'm not like this guy over here that's doing, that's like sinning and like giving up his life to sin. Like, he's being super self-righteous.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know somebody like that. And we all like sit there and hear that story and we go like, wow. Ironically, we'll go, wow, thank God I'm not like that Pharisee.
Yeah, he said,
it's me.
He said, yeah, I'm Orthodox. Inquire.
Yeah.
Brushes off shoulder.
Inquire.
My wife and I will actually we're actually going to be brought in as catechumens tomorrow. So we kind of start like our lengthy catechism to join the church proper tomorrow, because up until now, there was a bit of time where I was just the only one kind of investigating the church. And then over the course of, a couple of years, we had more and more conversations about a family or as a family. And how my wife and I are kind of on the same page. So we're actually being brought in to like start our journey like into the church tomorrow morning.
Sweet.
I've been an inquirer to the church for like 3 years.
Gotcha.
He said, "Congrats, my catechumen year was full of insanity." Did I say that right or wrong?
Catechumen. Sounds like a spice.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, put a little catechumen in my spaghetti. Yeah, but yeah, it's to be catechized into the church. It's they want you to gain the mind of the church and like truly learn what the church teaches. So it's basically like they want you to be very, very well aware of the church that you are entering before you begin having communion administered to you and the rest of the sacraments. Like they're giving you like a lengthy period of time to determine to both be determined by the church that you are earnest in what you're doing, and also for you to have that kind of journey yourself, so that by the time you reach the finish line of your catechesis, you can, with a good conscience, join the church without any apprehension.
Well, let's wrap this up. Finish up. Let's try to figure out what Bill Donahue actually says, what he means, because I'm still trying to understand what he means. And then we'll move on to the next subject.
Sweet. 5. Do you remember the story of Joseph and the amazing colored coat and all of this kind of business? Well, Joseph talked to his brothers that had sold him into slavery. Remember? Oh, there was about 10 brothers, and they dumped him, and they thought they were really getting rid of him. Well, they came back and apologized because now Joseph is a big shot. And they're coming.
That's not exactly how that story went down.
That's pretty close.
No.
They didn't know it was going to be him. When they showed up to beg for food, they had no idea they were about to see their brother.
Yeah,
that's true.
That's not how any of that went down. But anyway, just one more point in that fellow's favor. But anyhow,
back trying to get a deal out of Joseph, and they come back and they apologize. Oh, we're sorry that we sold you into slavery. But in Genesis 45:8, it says, "It was not you that sent me, but God." In other words, Joseph says, you may have intended it for evil, but God intended it for good. In other words, nature intervened in this thing. So, I mean...
What? God...
He says in other words, but what he said before wasn't what Scripture actually said. When he said, in other words, what you intended for evil, God used for good, he made that sound like he just came up with that off the top of his brain dome, but that's actually what Scripture says. When he says, in other words...
How in the world do you go from what man intended for evil, God intended to good, to nature did it? Like, God and nature are not the same thing at all.
It's just another
That's
way
not even close.
To get a point across, and you're spiraling about
no,
it. No,
the nouns are completely... No, I don't. The nouns are completely different. The nouns are completely different.
Roll it back. Roll it back like 20 seconds and let's hear that again. So.
All right, let's have a replay here, folks. If I can get it right. Let's see. We're at 37. There we go. Instant replay.
Oh, we're sorry that we sold you into slavery. But in Genesis 45:8, it says, it was not you that sent me, but God. In other words, Joseph says, you may have intended it for evil, but God intended it for good. In other words, nature intervened in this thing. So, I mean, surely...
I'm not crazy.
What's wrong with that?
God is not nature, silly goose.
God is nature.
God is the force that is nature.
No, he is outside of nature.
Right, he is everything.
He made everything. That doesn't mean he
is
nature. No, he isn't.
He is in everything.
That's not what Scripture...
Yeah,
it says he is in all things, not that he is all things.
Exactly.
It can be a burning bush.
Being in something is not being something.
Yeah,
he's still the driving force behind everything.
He is the driving force behind everything.
Yeah, in him we live
and
all
not what he
meant.
No, it isn't.
In things.
That's not what he's saying.
That's all he's saying.
When people say nature, what they mean is coincidence and circumstance. They don't mean the guiding hand of the Almighty through providence.
You can't just infer what he means.
That's what nature is always associated
Then
with.
don't listen to that part. Listen to the
Okay,
sentence
we'll
he
move
said
on.
before.
We'll just scratch
My God.
that. Move on. Nothing to see here. Going on.
Surely Judas misread this thing about the kingdom. He totally misunderstood it. But if you read in Matthew 27:5, you'll find that Judas came back, took the 30 pieces of silver, threw it back, and hung himself. Now that hardly sounds like a guy who was a traitor. I mean, this guy was really broken by the mere thought that, oh, brother, did I screw this up? I thought, he didn't know that according to the divine plan acting out in this myth, he didn't know that he was the principal mover of universal salvation. He had no idea that. All he figured, he was a traitor. And of course, Christianity has treated the guy as a traitor, which of course he wasn't at all. Say.
Can you pause it real quick? Okay, so in this guy's version of what's happening, right? He's basically describing Judas as a guy like, oh, Judas, he got used as a pawn for this part of the plan. And according to that logic, God basically just left him to his despondency immediately after, and then just like sat back and like watched from above as Judas went screaming out of the city and tied a noose around his neck, died, and then fell on the ground and bursted open and spilled his guts everywhere. Like, he was just part of God's plan, and God just like, went, yep, that's that has to happen, but he's still one of the good boys. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me.
It's assuming
like he got used as a pawn, and then like he left him to that terrible a fate.
It's assuming the whole event is a prophecy when the crucifixion and resurrection is the prophecy. Everything that happens around it is variable. The bottom line is Christ will be crucified and he will rise from the dead. That's the prophecy. But as far as like what Judas does afterwards, how the disciples react, all those details, that's subject to human will. Now, you could argue that through providence, Christ would be crucified no matter what Judas did, and that would be the interpretation I would take. But God also positions people through foreknowledge. Huh?
Somebody had to betray Christ because Christ was, like, karma wouldn't let anybody betray Christ because he didn't do anything to deserve betrayal.
But so you're presupposing
that
karma,
Judas,
like you're importing a different religious concept that's foreign to the Judaism of Christ's day in order to interpret like a Jewish prophecy.
It's not foreign at all. Reap what you sow.
Yes,
that's
there's
karma.
cause and consequence,
yeah, but karma imports
you're giving
a lot
it a
more
mind.
Okay, well then reap what you sow, whatever the word for that is. Wouldn't let anything bad, like betrayal, happen to Jesus, so he had to have somebody.
You're assuming sentience into the force, though. Yes, reap what you sow is a law like gravity, but that doesn't necessarily mean it has a sentient force to it. That's providence.
And
if you lie, someone's more likely to lie back to you.
It's like magnetism, dude. It's a polarity. Like, it's a balance. It's equilibrium.
It's a force of nature to an extent in terms of like how people interact with each other. That doesn't mean that it's going to providentially guide circumstance.
If you say so.
I understand karma to be the same way. Like, I don't think karma has a sentient
I think this magnetic
component.
force is tied in. This magnetic force that we're talking about is tied into the cycles of time that we were talking about earlier in the stars.
How does magnetism have a will?
I'm not saying it does. I'm saying it's all in the cycles. These stories have to happen. They have magnetic polarity, if you will, which is what we're referring to as karma.
Okay, well, I'll take your word for it. You're using analogies that don't imply a sentience, but in order to compel Judas to behave in one particular way, that would require a sentience. That's the
devil.
Yeah,
yes, the devil, but the devil's not karma.
Laws. You're talking about these universal laws like the karma that you just mentioned. Like, I'll just use karma for the sake of the argument.
Right.
But it's kind of referencing what Gary was saying just a minute ago. Like, you're talking about these universal laws external to God. Like, he has nothing to do with like generating them, causing them, or manipulating them in any way. These are just laws that operate outside of God. Is that kind of the way you understand it? Or are you saying that God created these universals and uses them to accomplish stuff?
Yes, it's the word. God created these laws.
That is the what?
It's the law. It's the balance that's the Old Testament talks about. It's like these, the law.
Are these laws external to God, or did God create these universals?
He created them. But like God is the Word. Like he sent the Word was his son. That Jesus was the physical form of the law, and we as a society had to betray that to.
So God created a universal karmic law that could not accomplish his redemptive plan, so he had to like put that law to the side and do something else, because he's like, oh, this thing I was using earlier isn't going to work, so now I have to do something else.
No, I think he sent his son Jesus to simplify it.
I think, let me return back to my original claim here, because I feel like we're getting a little off track. My point is, even if Judas hadn't betrayed Christ, Christ still would have died on the cross and rose from the dead. That event was set, but everybody's individual choices within that
Judas
story.
is still part of the story.
Yes, I'm presenting a hypothetical to demonstrate that we are not talking about fatalism. I don't think Judas was condemned to be the one who betrayed Christ. I'm arguing that I don't think that people have no choice or sentience even when it comes to prophecy. There are events that have to happen, but people can behave in ways that are still making their choices. That, or God, in his foreknowledge, positions people that he knows will behave in a certain way to accomplish a certain end. But free will is still active.
Kind of like Molinism.
I don't know. Yeah, I've heard the term, but I don't know what Molinism means. So
yeah, there's better, more educated people than me that can expound on that more. But like what we were talking about earlier with other apostles, like the other apostles had sins that kind of afflicted them. So like Matthew, for instance, was a tax collector. So something that would come with that is greed. And from Peter, we know that he was hot-headed. So all of them had these various different passions that they could have been taken captive by.
Yeah.
So this isn't something I would say dogmatically. This is just what the Orthodox call like theologumena, like Orthodox or like just opinion, like religious opinion.
Yeah.
But perhaps it is that Satan was trying to find the most susceptible mind among Jesus's inner circle that he could take captive.
Yeah.
But the other ones were repenting of their vices, while Judas was just diving further and further into it.
Right.
So he looked at Judas and said, that one, that's the one.
So perhaps Satan was trying to sift all of them, but Judas is the one who fell.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. I can see that. Okay. We're going on rabbit trails, but we will get through this. I will keep my word to Cody. We will get through all of this, I promise.
Hey, I'm Sophie.
Hey, look, it's an ad.
And I'm one of the AI voices from Revoicer. My voice sounds so...
And it certainly doesn't sound like a traitor would kill himself because what he wanted to have happen happened. But
voice sounds so. It certainly doesn't sound like a traitor.
So remember, as you think of this poor soul Judas, that he was playing his part in this cosmic drama, and he played out the part that Jesus ordained for him when, in that fateful night, Jesus dipped the sop. You see. So you remember Jesus said, I laid down my life. Nobody can take it from me. So everyone had to play their part. And there's an interesting thing to think of. Jesus knew exactly where Judas was going, didn't he? He didn't try to stop him. He didn't try to. I mean, there was 11 other guys plus Jesus. Yeah, they certainly could have stopped him. Jesus didn't tell him, oh, stop that guy. He's going to betray me. Jesus had told him what to do, and hurry, do it quickly. And when Judas walked out the door, nobody tried to stop him. Jesus didn't try to stop him. And what's being told here symbolically, and always look at this mystically, don't look at it literally, is that
I disagree.
I knew you were going to stop there.
The desire nature,
with what?
The
what
ego
particular
nature,
part?
that which is absorbed.
We have to read the Bible mystically, not literally. Yeah. Not like
Did you hear anything he said before that, or?
I'm trying to glaze through it because we will never get through this thing, because he's literally, everything he's saying is something I disagree with, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna have to start letting stuff go, otherwise we're never gonna get through this.
Let me give a quick example, because there is a context in what he's saying that is actually biblical. I'm not saying that he's 100% correct with what he's saying right here, But you have St. Paul, for instance, talking about the law in the Old Covenant that you shouldn't muzzle an ox while it is treading the grain. And St. Paul himself talks about that as like, that's not just a law that just applies to how you treat your ox. That law also is interpreted spiritually in a spiritual context as somebody who is ordained to the ministry to serve God in that capacity has a right to make a living off of their service to God.
Well, it's a principle.
Don't muzzle the ox it's a spiritual interpretation as well as a literal one.
I think the Protestant understanding would be spirit of the law. Like there's a letter of the law and there's a spirit of the law. That's two different readings. But
there's spiritual interpretations to a lot of passages. But this is the kind of guy, this guy right here, he sort of takes that as license to see spiritual interpretations that, aren't necessarily implied directly by Scripture, but stuff that he sort of like generates himself.
Well, what he's trying to do is he's trying to make this impression that the whole crucifixion story is a myth. He is sitting there trying to take a historical narrative and put a mystic interpretation on it, so as to infer that it didn't literally happen. So it's a bait and switch. Yes, there's a spiritual reading to the law, but that doesn't mean that the entire gospel is just a myth. He's trying to take a...
Does he believe the crucifixion actually happened?
I don't think he does. I don't think he does,
but
based on this.
It doesn't matter. You can still glean what he's saying off of this. You don't have to agree with him. You can still glean the information he's trying to get, or the points he's trying to get across.
I know. I'm not saying... I know. Believe me, I don't agree with him. I think I glean what he's saying well enough, but what was the thing you were wanting me to highlight on?
You're doing all the glean.
Yeah.
Mr. Glean.
What was you said you were asking me if I'd listened to what he said before. Was there something in particular you were wanting me to focus on?
No, I was just talking shit.
You're just talking crap? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I disagree with like his entire framing of the event. I mean, and look, from a logical standpoint, I don't know why you would trust the guy, because he's gotten every blasted fact wrong. He's gotten Joseph wrong. He's gotten when Judas betrayed Jesus wrong. He's got dipping the sop wrong. He's gotten whether it was all the disciples or just one of the disciples. Like every blasted detail he used to build his case is wrong. And these aren't debatable. We saw in Scripture that he's literally getting all the details of the story wrong. And that's really a problem if you're going to do a mystical reading, because every little detail in the mystical reading has a symbolic meaning. So if you're screwing up the symbiology, as it were, you're screwing up the entire Dad Blamed story. So even if this were an allegory, he's still getting the allegory wrong because he's not getting the details of the actual events of the allegory right.
I don't know. I feel like he's hitting the main points and making his case.
How? He's literally got everything he said in terms of the facts of the story has been wrong. I didn't show this because I didn't memorize the timestamp. He doesn't even get the Merriam-Webster's definition of dipping the sop right.
I looked it up. It is right.
No, I looked it up too. The Merriam-Webster's online has a completely different definition than what he had on his little whiteboard. There's nothing about propitiation. There's nothing about propitiation.
It's a 30-year newer text.
True. That's fair. Maybe it changed in 30 years.
I gotta say, this video looks like it's pretty old.
Yeah, but my point is, every detail, every last detail is wrong, factually. You can look at the Bible.
The main points are correct.
How? His main points are built on the details.
No, they're not.
Yes, they are. He's saying, oh, those disciples, they were so stupid, but Judas was trustworthy. Boy, good old Judas. He just didn't know what was going on, poor man. And it's like, no, you idiot. He went and tried to betray Jesus a week before the Last Supper ever happened. The dipping the sop wasn't, hey, go betray me now. He didn't leave Judas to make his own conclusion. Judas went and decided that he was going to betray Christ because he was mad that God sided with a woman over him. He was publicly humiliated, and so he went to the priests in a huff. He may have not known that they were going to crucify him, and maybe when he realized they were going to kill him, he got mad. Maybe he thought they were just going to go to jail. Maybe he really did think Christ was going to have to set up his kingdom early. But whatever the case may be, the dude got mad and betrayed Christ because he was throwing a temper tantrum, which kind of undermines this idea.
Historically, it's very likely that Judas probably thought that they were just going to arrest him and maybe beat him up a little bit, because at the time the Jews didn't have the civil authority to execute anyone. That had to be facilitated by the Rome.
And I might be wrong about this, but wouldn't there be something odd about killing somebody like on the Passover? Like, wouldn't that be weird?
Yeah, they mentioned that in the story.
Yeah. So he had reason to think that they wouldn't have killed him. But the point is, he still went and decided to betray Jesus because he was throwing a temper tantrum, which kind of undermines the crux of the story, because this guy's saying that Christ gave the implication and Judas ran with it. But Judas had made the decision to betray Christ before the scene even opens. That kind of like defeats his entire purpose.
Yeah, but Christ still,
it messes
like,
with his narrative
Christ
a lot.
still made him the special boy. Like, he still trusted him.
No, because he was breaking bread with everybody. That's why the disciples didn't realize what was going on.
And it was like, it meant something more back then. When he dipped the sop, it meant something more back then. So he was like, oh, I'm the special boy.
I will say this. When I looked that up, I got competing information. So I don't know if dipping the sop means something special or not.
It does.
Well, some say it do, some say it don't.
Whenever it comes to Passover meals, everything means something in a Passover meal.
Okay, so let's say that it does. But the point is, though, whatever happened was subtle enough because he was breaking the bread and giving it to everybody. So we don't even, here's the thing, though, we don't even know, like, based on my reading, and maybe I'm getting this wrong, but the guy who got the first morsel was the guy that held the position of honor in that interpretation. We don't even know if Judas got the first morsel. We know he got a morsel after John asked him who it was. So John goes, who is it, Lord? And then Jesus goes, it's who I give this sop to. And then he dips it and gives it to Judas. So we don't even know if he was the first one that got it.
Yeah, you just said he was.
Likely not, right?
Yeah.
Because it likely wasn't him who got the first one, right? Because of the account in the gospel where it's talking about John literally, laying on Christ, because the followers of a rabbi at this time viewed their rabbi as like dad, essentially.
Yeah.
So like while he was leaning on his rabbi and, another disciple asked him like, hey, what's going on? Like, who's this person that's going to betray Rabbi? And Rabbi tells this one specific disciple, like, it's the one who I hand this specific piece of bread to. Right. If it was the first morsel that was being handed out, every disciple at the table would have been locked in to see who it was.
But if he was one among many, they wouldn't have been as likely to recognize it. Yeah. But because he was one among many and it was out of order, he probably wasn't noticed. So, yeah, I don't think...
Because if all 12 of them knew, it's very likely that they all would have, like, at least one of them would have tried to, book it out the door and chase him down. Like, this guy's going to go get you killed? Oh, bet. And then, like, run off and go tackle the guy in the dirt and start kicking the crap out of him.
Yeah. Now, I mean, I do wonder if there was, like, and this is just me speculating, I don't know. I do wonder if there was, like, some kind of supernatural dulling of the senses, as it were, because Peter heard the dipping of the sop thing. Because if you look in Mark, that detail's mentioned. So Peter heard Christ say that, but Peter didn't do anything either. You would think Peter would have been the first one to like kill Judas or something, if he had actually got wind of it. So the fact that he didn't jump on it is strange, but he obviously heard the comment. So I mean, otherwise I don't think it would be recorded in Mark. But I don't know why he didn't attack him. But the disciples as a whole, they didn't know what was going on. Only John and Judas heard the comment, or not only.
Merriam-Webster says it's a conciliatory or
propitiatory.
Propitiatory.
Okay.
Gift or gesture.
And what is this in reference to again? Like what definition you guys talking about?
The sop. Yeah, are you looking from a book?
No, this is Merriam-Webster online.
Okay, well then who I was looking up got it wrong then. I'll show you who I pulled it up from. Find it here. I've got way too many tabs. Here we go. The guy I was looking up that says the Merriam-Webster Online Dictionary says a stop is a piece of bread dipped and steeped in liquid. Might have been a solid food at the table of the evening. So he was just defining it as a piece of bread. So, or not even necessarily bread. It could also have been a persimmon. in some translations, the Vine's Expository Dictionary says it's a morsel or a fragment. So, dipping the sauce in the hand.
Okay, so
yeah.
Example of sop in a sentence. As a sop to the teachers' union for supporting his re-election campaign, the mayor promised to push for the abolition of the residency requirement.
Well, can I ask something?
It's a bribe.
I think it's a different thing, and I don't know if it's even the same. Like it's both. It's the same word spelled the same way, but like I don't think it's meant to be the one interpreted, in this passage or in what he's talking about, like what the.
Hey, I'm just telling you what the word means.
Yeah, so we're getting different definitions. I'm not sure it matters all that much, though. Because, again, how? Explain to me why it matters.
You're just saying it doesn't matter.
Tell me why I'm wrong. Give me a rebuttal.
Bribe. It's saying, I trust you.
Yes, I understand that's what you think. Tell me why it matters. Tell me why it matters.
A bribe is an inherently underhanded, dishonest thing. So, like, Jesus is offering Judas a bribe? That doesn't sound right.
That's what it says, man.
That's not. That's why I'm saying I think like these are words that are spelled the same way, but they don't mean the same thing. There's other words like this.
Bribe has a negative connotation nowadays. I mean, these things change, but
if it was
they
symbolic,
had a negative connotation in Scripture too. Bribery was viewed as a negative thing in the New Testament as well.
Well, even by the symbolism that we're arguing about. Dipping the sop would have been a recognition of honor in the context of the Passover. And that's
gave Judas pride.
Well, he already had pride, but even it doesn't matter. Like the point
is,
that only would have mattered if Judas got the first piece, because everybody got a piece. Everybody got a piece of the bread. So we don't even know if Judas was the first one who received the bread. We only know that he received a bread. How does that not matter? Because
it doesn't matter to the story.
It can't be a bribe or something for a position of honor if everybody gets a piece. If everybody is essentially being treated equally in the story.
It's referring to the sop.
Yes, but Judas would not have interpreted. That's what I'm saying. Everybody did get a sop.
No,
that's what I'm telling you. Yes, they did. Because he was breaking the bread. And when you got the piece of the bread, you would dip it in the gravy. Yes, because there was bowls of gravy on the table. They were breaking the bread, and people were dipping the bread and eating it.
You literally said that John.
John asked him.
What do you mean?
What do you mean?
It's to who I give the sop. So they all betrayed him?
What happened is John asked him who it is. Jesus said it's who I give the sop. So John asked him the question. Jesus takes the bread, dips it, gives it to Judas. Judas takes it. What I'm saying, though, is that event happened after John asked him, but Jesus was already breaking bread in the account in Mark, indicating that everybody was already eating when this took place, which means Judas may not have been the first one to have received it, in which case he wouldn't have been the one that was getting the position of honor.
You're just making that inference.
Cody, can you read that definition of sop again, the one that you're talking about? Like that full definition.
A conciliatory.
There's a point I want to make.
A conciliatory or propitiatory bribe, gift, or gesture.
Okay, so propitiatory. So Jesus is giving something propitiatory to Judas with the context that you're saying is appropriate here. But for something to be propitious, I just looked up that definition because I've heard the definition before. But to make someone propitious, like to give somebody a propitiatory offering, means to gain favor from that person or to appease them or to make them like well disposed or favorable towards you. But Judas got up and went to go betray Christ into.
He thought he was doing him a favor.
No, we've already established he wasn't.
What?
He thought he was doing him a favor.
We've already established that couldn't have been the case because his plan took place before the Passover. He made the deal with the priest before he took the Passover. So how could it have been a favor?
What favor did he think he was doing?
Yeah,
because he thought Christ was going to pull some sneaky business and put the kingdom on the heaven and do some he didn't think he was going to get killed.
But Cody, we've already established that there wasn't some good motive in the betrayal. He ran off to the priest as a result of Bethany. He was mad because he was humiliated.
Kind of like underhanded and dishonest.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
It'd make
like,
him a liar.
Jesus is sending Judas off on a mission where, like, he knows Judas is misunderstood about what he's doing. He just doesn't stop him. Like, that seems pretty dishonest. Like,
but Judas was going
Judas
to do
thinks
it
he knows
anyway.
what he's doing, and Jesus knows better, and he just doesn't stop him. Like, why? That doesn't make any sense.
Because he wouldn't listen. He wouldn't listen if he did. He was listening to his thoughts. That's the point of the story. Like, Judas kept listening to his thoughts.
You're
he
still
had the devil
missing
on his shoulder.
You're still missing what I was talking about with the problems in the definition that you're choosing, though. Like, you're saying that Christ gave a propitious offering. Like, I want Judas to see me, like, favorably here. So that's basically implying that Christ employed the use of deception to get Judas to betray him.
No.
That sounds more like...
Because Judas already didn't like him, so he wanted to gain his favor. Like, he wanted to be even with him.
Then why does he say, what thou doest, do quickly?
Like, he knows he's going to do it.
Because he knows he's going to do his own will. Like, because he's got the pride.
Okay, Cody, you like karma. The part of karma is cause and effect. So let's go over the action-reaction steps of this story. Okay? Bethany happens. Christ rebukes Judas for calling out the girl who anointed his feet with ointment. Judas is humiliated. He knows the priests are planning to betray Jesus, so he goes to the priests and makes a deal with them. The Passover happens. Jesus says, one of you is going to betray me. Okay? Telling Judas, without telling everybody else, I know what you're going to do. So why does he not tell the other disciples? Why do they not deal with him correctly? Because Jesus is saying, I know what you're going to do, but I'm not going to tell everybody. You don't have to do it. I'm giving you an out. So then the next thing that happens is John asks Jesus, essentially in private, who is it? And then Jesus says, the one who I give the sop. So one of two things is happening. Either Jesus is directly communicating to John who it is, or one of three things. Either Jesus is communicating to John who it is, or Jesus is making a last, let's just say that this whole thing is about gaining favor. If you're right, then the case would be that Jesus is going, I'm giving you a morsel, I'm trying to get your favor, please don't do this. And then he says, what thou doest, do quickly. In other words, make up your mind. I'm giving you one of three scenarios. So it's either he was telling John in private who the traitor was, or he was trying to give Judas a final out before he made up his mind, or both. Those are your three options. But either way, Judas had already made up his mind to betray Christ a week ago. So this idea that Judas inferred that he was supposed to betray Christ doesn't work, because he's already made up his mind to do that. The question of the story question is, can Christ persuade Judas not to, or is Judas going to go and do it anyway? And the story seems to indicate that Christ, even though he was reaching out to Judas for the last time, goes ahead and betrays him anyway.
You just said the story seems to indicate that.
Yes, I'm presenting multiple theories. I'm trying to give you an out so you can rebut me. That's what those qualifiers are. It's me trying to be nice.
What?
I am saying...
Don't do that to me. Just talk to me.
I am saying Judas's motives are already established earlier in the story. So William Donahue's interpretation makes no blasted sense, because he is saying that Judas inferred from the sop that he was supposed to betray Christ. That cannot possibly be the case, because Judas had decided to betray Christ a week before. There is no way on this side of creation that you can correlate the sop with the interpretation that you're supposed to betray Christ. No way that works.
The most logical interpretation that you could get from a plain reading of the text is when Jesus says, whatever you have determined to do, go and do quickly. I don't think Judas took that as like, that's a signal, boss? All right, 5. Pew! And he leaves like a shadow of where he was standing and stuff like that. No, I think the right interpretation is that, like, whatever you have to do, go and do quickly. I think at that moment, Judas's face, like, the color drained out of it. He was like, the jig is up. And he ran out of, like, shock and embarrassment.
The way I played that scene in the Passion Play is I acted, like, really indignant and mad that Christ had caught me, and I stormed out like I was having a temper tantrum. I don't know if that's the right interpretation, but that's the way I played the character during the play. So, because it is, he is outing him.
He was probably very angry too, but I think at that moment he's being told in a manner, like, in short amount of words by Jesus. He's being told, like, I know what you've determined in your heart to do, just go do it.
Yeah.
And he was probably just like, oh my gosh, like his knees probably buckled when Jesus said that to him, and he probably just took off and ran. He had to get out of there.
I mean, that could have been it too, but the point is Christ is calling him out, and the reason he's calling him out is to give him a final choice, because Judas could have said, never mind, I know you're God, you just caught me. Like, he didn't have to go do it, but... No.
Yeah, he could have stayed right there and, like, fallen to his knees and repented.
Right.
Because we know elsewhere in Scripture, you know, God desires, like, all sinners to repent. Like, he wants us to repent. We have that choice to do it. So there's not just this one, while it is prophesied that there will be a son of perdition, that there will be this person who offers up, you know, Christ to his death, it's not determined exactly who that person is going to be. Like, nobody before that very fateful Passover was thinking, like, nobody had a context for what that prophecy actually meant in that moment. I don't think any of the apostles were sitting there wondering, who's it going to be, guys, like an episode of Traitors or something. You know, like, I don't know. I think like what we were talking about earlier, like it could have been anybody in that circle. And like I said, this is just theological opinion. It's not something I'd say dogmatically. It could have been literally anybody reclining at the table with Christ. But Judas was the one that was, like, so spiraling into himself and his own desires and his own passions that, you know, the evil one looked at him and went, that's the one. That's perfect. That's the guy I need right there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's why Donahue is wrong.
That does. What do you mean? That's why he's wrong?
He's wrong because Judas had already made up his mind to betray Christ. I.e., he had hatched the plan a week before. So there's no way the sop was an implication that he was supposed to go betray Jesus. He had already made up his mind to betray Jesus. The sop might have been favor. There might have been symbolic value to it. But that doesn't mean Judas is going to infer that the right thing to do is to betray him, because he'd already made up his mind to do that.
But he hadn't yet.
Yes, he had. That's what I'm telling you. He did it whenever he made a deal with the priests after Bethany. He hadn't
betrayed him yet. He got the money for it.
No, yeah, he got the money for it. There was a final out. But what Bill Donahue is saying,
can't do it twice.
When Bill Donahue is going through this, like, whole play-by-play, like dipping the sop, he makes this connection that the sop is some kind of favor. And because Judas received this token of favor, that meant, I've got this special job. I've got this special task. He must want me to start his kingdom. I'm going to go start his kingdom. As if the betrayal was supposed to be this good thing that was going to help Christ along, and the favor symbolized that. That could not be the case, because Judas had betrayed Jesus out of anger for being humiliated in Bethany. Judas's motivation was not to help Christ. He was mad. The story establishes that Judas was furious with Christ a week before the event.
So you think he was happy that he won?
No, I think that he got
clearly
scared.
Not.
Right.
That just the fact that he ran outside the city and killed himself afterwards. That's something that we've seen happen in a lot of people's lives, where they do something terrible that they don't think they can ever recover from, like some massive blunder, some horrible sin. So, you know, that's what basically murder-suicides are.
Yeah.
You do this horrible, horrible thing, and you cannot perceive ever recovering from it, so you off yourself. That's
but Donahue,
Judas is the
Donahue's interpretation of events is that Judas went to betray Christ thinking it was going to establish his kingdom. And then when Christ is crucified, he despairs, realizing he got it wrong, and then goes and kills himself. What I'm saying is that cannot possibly be the case because Judas had already agreed to betray Christ a week before. So Judas was doing it when he was angry, and it was more like what you're saying, Jeremiah, as a crime of passion. It's like, I'm doing this because I'm mad, and then when the deed is done, it's, oh crap, what have I done? And then he goes and kills himself just like a murder-suicide. So,
evil, like what we were talking about with like evil thoughts that will like tempt you to do things. And if you give in to them, you'll do those things. But afterwards, after you've done the thing, they might stick around to torture you, but a lot of the time they take a step back and they let you have your clarity, your lucidity back so you can realize, oh my gosh, what did I just do? You know?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's where you experience like the condemnation, like the temporal, condemnation of your own mistakes, of your own sin is like, and when you're caught up in the passion, when you're doing the thing, you don't realize what you're doing. Like people who cheat on their spouses, a lot of the time they don't realize, the gravity, the horrible sin that they're committing when they do it. But when they're alone and they're sitting in silence and they're thinking about what happened, that's when it sets in.
Yeah.
And that's Judas had one of those moments.
And that's when Satan really goes after you. He's like, well, there's no turning back now. You've gone too far. And then that despair kicks in. And then you do something awful, like what Judas did. So, yes, is my argument. I'm sure you don't agree, but do you at least understand what I'm saying, Cody?
I'm not sure what you're arguing. No.
Bill, I'm saying Bill Donahue's interpretation is wrong. It is wrong because
he's... all of it? You can't get anything from it?
Yes, basically all of it because it starts from a bad presupposition, but...
Well, I feel like you're just hand-waving a lot of stuff.
The big problem that I have with it is...
Okay, yeah, sorry, go on, Jeremiah.
No, that's all right. That's why I was picking so much at the definition of SOP you're choosing to use. I know it sounded like semantics at first, that we were just kind of fussing over the use of this word, but the implication of that word and the way that you're using it implies like a propitiatory offering, is said when you read the definition. So that means that Christ is offering Judas this here, I want you to love me. I want you to have a good disposition towards me. Even though I already know what you're going to do, I'm still giving you a chance. But I know you're not going to take it. That seeing it that way just isn't coherent. I don't understand.
Because it's the right thing to do. It's to put forward love no matter what. That's what Christ did. And if he didn't, he wouldn't have been Christ.
Christ was still trying to save him, though.
Right. That's what I'm telling you.
That's not what Bill Donahue's saying, though. What Bill Donahue is saying is that the sop was specifically meant to indicate a favor, like Judas was esteemed above the others. That's how he uses the term. That's how he uses the meaning of the sop, because his conclusion is because Jesus gave him an honored position, Judas, for whatever reason, maybe it was Satan planting the idea in his head, maybe it was the Jewish culture, whatever, but for whatever reason, Judas took that sop and thought, God has given me a special task. I'm supposed to betray him. And he thought that it was this great idea to betray him. Number one, that doesn't work because Judas had already gotten the idea to betray him a week earlier. Number two, the whole sop thing, in the way that the story is actually structured, is Christ, if anything, even if that were right, even if the whole favorable sop thing were correct, that would mean that Christ is trying to give him a final olive branch. He's trying to help him. Please don't. It's like a plea. Please don't do this.
No, it's not a plea. You're inferring that.
I'm saying that's the only option it could be if the sop actually had that symbolic meaning.
No, it's just
because
if with the definition you're going with, it would have to mean that. That would be to make somebody propitious. To give them a propitiatory offering would literally be like, please feel this way.
Yeah,
because he already hates him. He already
feel a certain way about you.
Yeah,
he knows he already sold him out. So he's like, hey, here's some love. And so the devil tricked Judas into thinking, oh, well, I mean, obviously I'm supposed to do the thing. He's approving of it. And he shouldn't have been listening to thoughts.
I think I understand what you're saying. So you're saying that even though Judas agreed to betray Jesus in Bethany, a detail B. Donahue ignored, by the way, and got completely wrong.
Oh, yeah, I'll give you that.
Yeah, so he got that wrong. So what you're saying is, though, even though Judas had already gotten the idea that he was supposed to betray Christ, or he was going to betray Christ, and even though he had already set everything up, Christ gave him the sop, trying to say, please don't do this, and Judas got the idea that, oh, he's approving of me doing this.
Okay, yeah, you could look at it that way.
I'm trying to understand how you look at it, because that's completely freaking wrong, but I'm trying to understand your perspective. So
Go ahead.
Is that how you view it? Am I getting your interpretation of events correctly?
You didn't finish your thought.
I thought I did. Okay, so let me start over. Even though what I understand, what I think you're saying is, even though Judas had already agreed to betray Jesus a week earlier, Christ giving him the sop it wasn't him implying that he was given a special task, again, like Bill Donahue says. It was, oh, Christ knows what I'm doing, and he's telling me it's okay.
Yes.
Okay. So I think I understand what you're saying. I disagree, because I think when Jesus says one of you is going to betray me, but he doesn't out Judas, that's still an appeal to get him to turn away and not do it. Because obviously to say the word betray has a bad connotation, right? And he also says in that story, woe be it to the man who betrays the Son of Man. It would be better for him if he were not born. Like, he warns against this action. He says this action is a bad thing in the story before Judas leaves, if I'm remembering the count correctly. So it's very clearly communicated that the betrayal is bad before Judas receives the sop. So that cannot work.
I would argue that by him saying, like, it would be better for him that he were not born, that's implying, because what his lot is eternal condemnation.
I mean,
like,
it could be that.
I think that's the only thing it could mean. Because if it's better for you to never have been born, then, like, what kind of horrible fate is it talking about, like, befalling that person? That their fate, their lot in life is so horrible that it would be better if they had just never existed at all.
Right, and that gets into whether or not Judas was saved. I don't think he was, but it does. The point is, betrayal was communicated as a bad thing, and so there's no way that he could.
Kind of like when Christ says about people who mislead or abuse children, it would be better for them if a millstone was tied around their neck and they were thrown into the depths of the sea. It's basically saying, like, it would be better for that to happen than what would happen to them if you allow this person to exist, like, to continue existing in society.
Yeah.
So if they receive no judgment in this life for what they are doing, then, like, they're going to live their entire life thinking, huh?
But you do. You judge yourself, and it wears on you. The guilt eats you alive, so it'd be better for you to tie a millstone around your neck and die immediately.
Yeah, because, like, living with that condemnation would just be a lifetime of guilt and misery. So you apply that to Judas as well. It would be better if he was not born. Why? Because what's going to happen to him now that he has been born, now that he does exist, is going to be, like, he's not, by saying this, he's not faulting God for having created Judas. Like, he's basically saying, like, it would just be better if he never existed at all, like, in a hyperbolic sense, because now that he does, and now that he's done this horrible thing, like, judgment is going to come to him.
Yeah, so when the discussion for the traitor, like who's going to betray him, goes on for a while, if I'm remembering the account correctly. So Judas knew that the betrayal was perceived as bad. So there's no way that he could have interpreted the sop, that he was the taking of the sop, to be, this is a good thing that I'm supposed to do. It had to be a final reaching out, like, you don't have to do this, if it's anything. So,
I mean, do you think Judas? What if Judas didn't think he was betraying him? You know.
well, I think we established that he did because he was angry about Bethany. He clearly left because he was angry.
I don't know, man.
Well, since we're all quiet, I'm assuming we've talked ourselves out. Shall we go on?
Well, yeah, I was gonna chime in finally.
Yeah, sorry, Trevor.
You guys wanna go ahead and end it on that note?
No, because I gave Cody my word, Dad Blanket.
Yeah,
I promised him I would go through it.
Finish the video.
Okay, well we can split it into 2 episodes, I guess.
We'll figure it out.
Okay.
With the material life is not to be destroyed. There is no God that's going to intervene and break your will or anybody else's will. It must destroy itself. That's why the sacrifice of Judas to commit suicide. See, it's got to destroy itself. The self-destruction must take place before the soul can move into eternal life. In other words, you must dip the sop, if we want to get back to the early part of this message. You must bribe the flesh.
Okay, help me. I'm so lost. Listen. I'm so lost.
Betray me and I will die, and then both of us will live eternally. And you do that by how? Taking yourself into a position of separation from the flesh. Okay? Allowing the flesh then to turn on you so that you die. In other words, you and the flesh will no longer be acting in harmony. You die to the flesh. And when that betrayal, that sacrifice takes place, you're then prepared to raise yourself up to the higher realms. When Jesus, the flesh, was crucified, Judas, the ego, killed itself. And both were set free. Do you understand that? Forget Jesus, forget Judas, forget the flesh. Think of you. The Jesus part of you is betrayed by the Judas part of you. The flesh will no longer, it misunderstands totally what's going on here. See? And so the flesh will no longer have a communion, so to speak, with the spirit, with the soul, and you're set free. And by that, both then live eternally. And I don't mean the flesh, the physical flesh lives eternally. I mean that which is the lower instincts, because they will be renewed. So try to understand Judas in yourself. See how important the Judas nature is in you. Give it permission to betray you, just as Jesus did. Say, go and do what you do quickly. So the system will kill you from them and set you free to God. And the system will, but I'm telling you, as soon as you move on bringing yourself together with that inner realm, as soon as you move to sacrifice your ego in meditation, the system will destroy you. The system will accommodate you. They'll crucify you. Because they'll call you a cult, they'll call you a bum, they'll call you all kinds of words, and they'll kick you out from amongst their precious, sanctified few. And you'll be set free to raise yourself up. So, as we've seen in this message, and I'm sorry it was interrupted, but as we see in this message, Judas wasn't a bad guy after all. Okay? Christian Bill.
Okay. I have no idea what he said. I tried.
Okay, so he's talking about meditation. He's literally just talking about meditation. Separating the left brain from the right brain. Whenever you take no thought, you are betraying your flesh, right? So your ego, your thoughts are your ego. That's your Judas. And whenever you go into meditation, you're pushing all that away. And it's getting rid of itself.
How does that work with the whole you have to let the Judas betray you?
Because your thoughts will escalate whenever you ignore them. They get louder.
So by fighting the thoughts, you're letting them betray you because the act of fighting them makes them stronger?
What?
I don't know. I'm trying to understand.
Wait, what?
What's happening? So okay, this is just my
I didn't
opinion.
realize what was happening honestly until like the last couple blurbs that we've listened to. But like I was saying earlier, you can take bits and pieces of what he's saying, and you can sort of glean some truth out of them. My issue with this guy is that he's not saying that, oh, okay, what I'm telling you is kind of interpretation of what happened here. No, what he's saying is this is the meaning behind what's happening here, like the exclusive meaning. This is what's happening, definitely. And
You're
it's
not forced to
basically
listen to him.
neglecting.
I mean, like forced to take his opinion. You could just. I mean, that's kind of a personal thing, isn't it?
In my opinion, I think he's got an idea in his head. He knows what he's trying to say, but he's mixing his analogies and metaphors together and getting a bunch of details wrong, and it's just coming out chaotic. Because at one
that's
point,
how I talk, honestly.
We love you. So, all right, guys, it has been 2 hours and 10 minutes. This is way longer than I wanted it to be, and we've still got like 3 other subjects.
That's what she said.
So, guys, we're gonna call this. Now, remember, we're not leaving. We're not leaving.
We're not leaving.
This is just the end of that part 1, so I don't have to edit.
Like Jordan Belfort, not leaving.
We're not leaving. I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving. So, no, we're still going to be here. I'm just saying the end of this to mark the end of episode 1 because we're posting this later on YouTube. So, guys, thank you so much.
We're already here.
Yes, even though we're already here. So, guys, thank you so much for watching. And remember, Colostrum is Santa Claus. We'll see y'all later.
That's true.
Here comes Santa Claus. Here comes Santa Claus.
Okay.
Oh.
So, all right, on to part 2.
Okay.
Who wants to
part 2.
sign us in?
I will. What are we talking about?
We are talking about Mike Benz and USAID. It's a continuation of Tuesday.
Ooh.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
All right, everybody. Welcome to Faith, Fiction, and Folklore, where we try not to F the podcast.
Failure.
Today.
We already did that.
Today we're going to talk about USAID.
Again.
Jamie Benz, is that right?
Mike Benz.
Mike Benz. I don't know who that is.
You might
Gary.
It's just some guy that was on Rogan the other day.
Yeah, he's on Joe Rogan. So Mike Benz has been studying this whole USAID situation for a very long time, and they've basically had their fingers in a lot of pies. They've been overthrowing governments, they've been hijacking media, they've just been in all sorts of nasty nonsense. And so I wanted to focus this week on one particular point because we already did like a very broad conversation about it. But I wanted to focus on one particular aspect, and that is the drugs and the hip-hop culture in USAID's role in that. So, yeah. So we wanted to talk about it and kind of maybe just discuss the CIA's role in pushing drugs all over the world. Because America's got such a great intelligence service. It's fantastic.
America runs on coke.
AIDS.
I was gonna say Duncan, but
All right.
Dunkin' Donuts AIDS.
Here we go.
Yeah. So first, hip hop.
Yeah.
Okay. The thing that you think you're gonna get in trouble.
To use.
What does your video sound like? Go to
What,
artlist.io
oh,
and
gosh,
get the
like an
best
ad.
music and
It's
sound
an ad,
effects for
guys.
your videos.
I've got to
The
get that
critical
ad
components
blocker.
they have there, and sometimes dominant
It won't
spot
work.
they have there, to weaponize those assets, and that gets back to this sort of EU fight. But I can pause and move to Brazil if you want.
Pause. I have to pee.
Okay.
When I come back, rap music, Brazil.
Yeah.
All right. We're right back.
You're
All
sure
right.
you're
We're
gonna
back.
listen to
So
Joe
first,
Rogan pee?
hip hop.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Okay. The thing that you think you're gonna get in trouble for.
Oh, you're gonna make me do this.
Well, you already teased it.
Easer.
I pooped a hammer.
I think it was the 2009 national network.
Was it just me? You guys are talking. I can barely hear you.
You don't want to hear us.
Maybe not.
Just
We're
that
talking
long
about
pause and a
stuff.
candy sandwich.
Yeah. Is it just me, or did that pause seem to communicate I'm going to die for saying this? So.
It did.
Possibly.
Yeah.
I bet he's fine.
Yeah, it'll be fine.
You might get USAID for it.
Oh.
Either that or that
Oh.
long pause was him. That long pause was just him sitting there. His stomach is like gurgling because it hurts. That long pause is just him like sitting there like, ooh.
It's not fear, it's just constipation. So.
Or the fear of constipation.
Oh, there you go.
Democracy, Cuba Rap, Journal of Democracy article that I believe was co-authored by Ned's founder, Carl Gershman, who openly said that Ned does what the CIA used to do, that they effectively took the baton from it. And again, the CIA has copies, according to the Washington Post and New York Times, of every grant Ned makes. When you look at the analysis, the in-house analysis done by Ned there, that there was this dense interplay between the Afro-Cuban population and the drug networks in Cuba. And then you look at the role of hip-hop and drug culture in retailing what is wholesaled in, obviously, USAID, CIA, Pentagon, narco networks. Like, for example, we talked about the Mujahideen narco network. They even set up a CIA bank right there to back it. We did the same thing in 1960. USAID set up in 1961. At the very moment, 2 weeks before USAID was created, JFK awarded the Green Beret to the Special Forces. Just 2 weeks before that. Then he creates that was October 1961. November 1961, he creates USAID. December 1961, 1 month after, he launches Operation Pincushion in Laos for the U.S. Special Forces to train and recruit hillside guerrillas in Laos, who are primarily funded by the drug networks that they sit on in the Golden Triangle. They sat on the opium of the Golden Triangle, and the way they financed their own guerrilla war, CIA-backed war, and this is all well known. Ving Pao was the commander there of the CIA mercenary rebel forces there. This is 1961 to 1967 in this period that I'm talking about. Special forces go over there to recruit these hillside guerrillas. They form an army. Ving Pao is made the head of it. This is going to connect to the rap thing in a sec. Ving Pao was financing the CIA's mercenary army by retailing the opium from Laos into these networks in Southeast Asia, like these CI proprietary banks, like everyone can look up Nugan Hand Bank or Castle Bank and Trust, these CI banks that were set up to launder basically drug proceeds. And they all got in a lot of trouble for this a few decades ago. Now, the problem is they couldn't sell enough because they were a scrappy little upstart, group of hillside guerrillas. So what did USAID do in 1967? This is the 1960s, how long this has been going on. They were recruited by the Special Forces. They were managed by the Central Intelligence Agency. USAID provided the financing, and this is all according to and in the Senate testimony of Professor Alfred McCoy. This is his book called The Politics of Heroin in Southeast Asia. He testified in front of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee in 1972. He detailed all this in his book. But USAID financially provided the financial assistance for Ving Pao and his narco terrorist network to purchase 2 airplanes from 2 CIA proprietary companies. One of them was Air America. Another one was Continental Air Services. Both of these have been revealed in subsequent years to be CIA proprietary airlines. So the CIA commander, the commander of the CIA rebel army, buys 2 planes from 2 CIA airlines and then uses them to traffic and retail the drugs by selling them to the market in Vietnam, where we had Special Forces boots on the ground. So basically it was wholesaled by the CIA in that case. And then it was the logistics for that network were provided by USAID. And then it was retailed to poor, unsuspecting souls all over Southeast Asia. Play the same game in the Golden Crescent with Afghanistan. Play the same game with the cocaine trade in its route from Peru and Bolivia up into Colombia and then up into the distribution networks in Miami, Los Angeles, Chicago, you name it. When you start having organized crime and drugs, as the front end that retails the products and services that are wholesaled and part of a intelligence or military operation, you can't sell those drugs by having someone with a Department of Defense ID badge on the street corner, on 187th and Broadway. There are retail networks for that, and that is the role of many of these drug mule and organized crime networks all over the world. And I have serious concerns about networks in Chicago. I mean, Gary Webb obviously wrote all about this in Dark Alliance, and there's all sorts of fantastic books on all of this if you want to read more, like Operation Gladio by Paul Williams. I mean, there's so much in this field, but Gladio, the role of narcotics is.
Sorry, what, Jeremiah?
I was just making the comment. He mentioned Operation Gladio. I don't know if you guys have looked into that one. It's absolutely wild. Like, implicates the Vatican, implicates the freaking mob in America. Like, yeah.
Well, tell us about it, because we're noobs.
I can't speak a whole lot to it. I can tell you the details that I heard. It's from I think I mentioned it on the last time I was talking with y'all, the Y-Files. It's a podcast. But yeah, Operation Gladio basically financed toppling regimes in different places in Europe, I believe during the World War II era. And also worked with, I don't know, I can't really get too much into it because I don't want to get details wrong. But I remember that the Vatican had a lot to do with financing like different operations having to do with Gladio, and that different mafia members, like different mafia bosses, like stateside in the United States, were brought on board to participate in it. Like, it reached into organized crime, like all over the Western world.
Crazy.
It is a whole crazy thing. But yeah, but what he's talking about with basically financed, like federally financed drug running, that would explain like the probably the larger part of the giant war between our two-party state over the border. Yeah. It's like it has way less to do with compassion for individuals trying to find their way across the border, and way more to do with keeping like these really seedy, incredibly unethical trade routes open.
Yeah, revenue streams for the CIA.
Sorry, what, Cody?
Yeah, like if you secure the border.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, if you secure the border,
you're screwing that up.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cody, sorry, Trevor, have we heard anybody from chat? Heard anything? We got a little intense there for a little bit, so I don't want to ignore anybody.
Not on this subject matter, no.
Well, what about the previous subject?
For a minute there, I got sucked into what this guy's saying. Like, I've heard of Mike Benz before because a lot of people on X are talking about him right now. But like, I really got sucked into what he was talking about here, and I forgot that we were on a show for a second. I was like,
yeah. I was like, crud, this has got to be transformative. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. It really makes me think of like Training Day, like the feds are at the top, like doing everything, like supplying all the drugs, and like the cops are just like managerial class for all the gangsters that are doing the drugs and selling the drugs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Trevor, sorry, did we have anybody? I just want to make sure we got everyone.
No, that intro and I we got to talk about The Chosen, the show.
Oh, okay. So
and then he did have
new season of that next month, I think.
Oh, nice.
And then he did have one last thing as we were exiting.
Okay.
But we'd already. You want me to read that?
Yes, go ahead.
Just scrolling. This is bad intro. Just scrolling through some church fathers on the sop. It seems the conversation gears towards the sop being water and bread being spiritual separation from others.
Mm-hmm.
That Judas never received, called the Eucharist. And then he's like, could make a whole episode on did Judas receive the Eucharist?
That goes back to what I was saying earlier about like what Judas did by taking the bread and eating the bread, like a reverse Eucharist. Like he was basically bringing condemnation on himself by doing that.
Yeah, I'm not
because
sure.
like you have you have elsewhere where St. Paul talks when he's instructing people on how to treat the Lord's Supper, and he's chastising people for getting drunk when they have the Eucharist together, that he's saying, this is why a bunch of you are sick and dying, like, because partaking of that unworthily, like without the proper disposition, can actually have physical consequences for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's certainly interesting, but I guess we need to keep moving. So.
Yeah, and then he gave his opinion on William Donahue.
Okay, yeah, well, let's go ahead and read it. We need to make sure. If somebody writes, we got to make sure we read their comment.
William Donahue seems like the type to put his Bible under the pillow and wake up with new ideas.
The kingdom is within.
There you go. What'd you say, Cody?
I said the kingdom is within.
Well, there you go. Back to the CIA and drugs. So.
And then you press play, and Mike Benz is like, and they were funding all kinds of stops coming over the border. Like, oh, this again.
In financing black budget military covert operations in every major place they spring, is a black box that is not my crusade. I frankly, again, I wish we didn't even go here but I do feel like you do need to have a side-eye glimpse into some of these worlds to understand internet censorship, because you are going to find USAID NGOs. If Bukele had not done the radical reforms that he had, the internet would have been completely censored by USAID and the State Department in order to rig hearts and minds against him, because they would want to stop him from cleaning out these drug gangs. He would stop him from cleaning up the crime. You're going to see the same thing about fact checkers in Pakistan, and for example, according to the Gray Zone report on USAID and NED in Bangladesh, and in fact, this is actually, I believe, on the U.S. Embassy in Pakistan's U.S. Embassy in Pakistan's website, the Countering Misinformation training seminar they had with the guy who's now the top foreign advisor in Pakistan, and they brought in the executive director of PolitiFact. Flew him all the way out to...
This is your brain when you're struggling
Hey,
to
look,
focus.
another ad.
And this is your brain when you're in the zone.
The U.S. Embassy in Pakistan to train journalists about...
What?
That intro is going to head out. Church in the morning. You'll have a good night. No need to read that out loud.
Bad intro. Thank you very much for listening. We really appreciate you commenting and interacting with us. It means a lot. We're obviously starting out the channel, so any interaction is always very much appreciated, man. So you have a great night. We'll talk to you later.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Cody?
I don't remember.
You want me to pause. So, no, you don't remember?
I did?
Yeah, you said pause. Or somebody said pause.
No, I
pause.
Pause. Maybe I'm schizophrenic. I don't know.
I was just thinking about dogs, I guess.
Dogs
and pausing.
We're getting tired, guys.
About how to counter misinformation. These same journalist training seminars we're seeing Internews do, we see SEPs do, we see the Atlantic Council do. But I come back to the U.S. Institute for Peace on a live URL as we speak, not even 2 years ago, made an impassioned plea to the Taliban to keep 95% of the world's heroin flowing. You have to explain that to the American people. That is the State Department's policy. If U.S. Institute of Peace is not going to go rogue against the State Department foreign policy there, because they're funded by the State Department. You see the same thing with these ISIS terrorist drug narco networks. Anyone remember the WikiLeaks email, Jake Sullivan to Hillary Clinton while Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State? ISIS is on our side in Syria. Well, that means the more of those poppy crops that get retailed off to ISIS networks, the more powerful and well-financed they are, the more they can pay their soldiers or stop their soldiers from defecting from being mercenaries. And lo and behold, that same network just toppled the Syrian government. And I should note, structuring through USAID is the sauce to this, because there is a sitting tweet from the U.S. Embassy in Syria from.
Sorry, what?
Pause it. Like I know what he's saying is true, and it just pisses me off to no end, because right now, currently, like, this is the battle going on, especially on X, is a whole bunch of people, making their own impassioned pleas on behalf of USAID, pointing to all the good stuff they do. I even have a friend that I served with in the construction battalions that's doing this right now, where he's like, USAID offers, all this food to people who are displaced by war and violence. They help them. They build schools.
But they caused the war.
So they're bringing up all of the stuff they do as cover, right? Like, because dummy, they have to do good stuff here and there, right? Because if they're just being cartoonishly evil, like the robber with the sack with the dollar sign on it, like running out the bank and not doing any acts of charity here and there to distract from it, then of course everyone's going to know.
Right.
They have to do some good stuff to distract from what they're doing. And like, that's why I was saying this is like pissing me off to hear this, because I know he's right.
Mm-hmm.
Like all of these wars, like, it's to, help the war profiteers keep making a buck, but at the same time, it's also like we have alternate streams of revenue, and particularly with nations in the Middle East, that has a lot to do with drugs. And this is all like sending our own people to die, to fight and die.
Yeah,
wars are bullshit.
To make people rich. It always goes back to that, sending young men and women to go die so people can get rich. And it's so maddening.
Yep.
You're not alone in that thought process.
Yeah.
That's why, like, I've had like 4 or 5 offers in the last couple of years, like from the Navy. Like, they've had recruiters close to my old duty station reach out to me. They don't do it anymore because I've turned them down enough. I've been offered like $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 signing bonuses to come back. And like, that's what I tell people when I'm like, and I say no every time. I could use $20,000, trust me.
Mm-hmm.
That could go a long way for me. That could help me out with a lot of stuff. But no, I can't work for those people anymore. Like, after I started learning stuff like what, Mr. Benz here is talking about, I was like, I cannot be part of this.
Yeah.
Now that I know, if I was ignorant and I didn't know that this kind of stuff was going on, then I could just go about my way. And there's people currently serving right now that do know this stuff is going on, but they have no moral or ethical, grounding in any kind of faith or philosophy that demands accountability from them. So they just keep doing it because they're like, whatever, it's a paycheck. Mm-hmm. But I have that grounding, particularly in Christ, that helps me delineate between good and evil. And I know this is going on, and because of those 2 factors, I can't do it. I cannot work for those people anymore.
Well said. Yes, you're right. This has to get fixed. I mean, they're in the middle of it, but I don't know how big a fight they're going to put up. So.
Yeah, I'm happy a bunch of it's being exposed right now. I tell my friends and family, like, this is kind of stuff that we all already sort of knew was happening. But now we're seeing the fine print detailing exactly how it's happening, because it's being exposed, like, drug into the light.
Yeah.
And still, I don't know who to trust, because I'm like, what if they're just telling us, like, bits of it, but not the whole story? Because what if it implicates them as well if they tell the whole truth? I don't know.
No, I think you're right. I think that's why they relied so much, like, they hated Trump so much, because he wasn't connected to those circles. And man, I think that just by itself. Yeah, he didn't need him, and they couldn't buy him off, and he was just a construction guy from New York, and that was the most dangerous thing that could happen to him. So I think, and that's why.
So they basically had to turn him into a cartoon villain to get everyone to hate him.
Yeah. So.
Like, can you believe this rich guy goes out with porn stars? Like, wow.
It's like
that's unprecedented.
Yeah, like, wow, that's exactly what I would expect to happen, but okay.
And then he paid her money to not talk about it.
Again,
like, that's never happened before. This is horrible.
Yeah.
Not approving, just saying, like, I'm not shocked. So.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that I think he's this morally, amazing guy, and he's got fantastic character. But like, if you got to point to his past sins just to deflect from the corruption that he's trying to deal with right now, it tells me that you're not interested in the truth, and you're more interested in just being comfy, just being so cozy.
Well,
And,
there's a lot of good, well-meaning people that have, a moral center, as it were, in Congress that get bought off. I mean, they just get chewed up by that system. You need somebody who's got enough resources to be independent of it and not, have enough money to fight back, number one, but just not be bought off in general as well. So, I mean, that's why they didn't like him. He was a billionaire. He had his own resources.
Right, like the insider trading that we all know, both Republican and Democratic Congress people and senators are guilty of. Like, I remember even being disappointed to find out that like somebody like Dan Crenshaw is currently becoming rich off of his position.
Yeah,
he's playing the stock market according to what he knows is happening in government. And it's basically like, how sometimes like in a gangster movie or in a show about gangsters, like some guy will be in a bind, so he'll go to a mob boss and like ask for help, and the mob boss will pretend like it's out of the goodness of his heart that he's giving him this money.
Yeah.
And then like, oh yeah, let me help you out. I'm doing this for you. And then when he comes back later to ask for more, he's like, nope, you're mine now. I'm not giving you any more money. That tap is cut off. But because I've given you all this money, I own you now. I feel like it's the same complex for a lot of those Congress people and a lot of those senators. Like they've made just millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Even though that isn't, money that they would get just off of their salary. They've made millions of dollars off of their position, so they cannot betray their position because they'd be betraying like the honeypot, essentially.
Yeah. It's a bad deal.
So they'll just do whatever it is, whatever the agenda is. They'll just fall right in line, go right along with it.
Yeah, exactly. Trevor, you got any thoughts, good sir?
No, I agree with you totally.
What?
Yeah. What?
What'd you say?
I agree with Jeremiah on that part.
Yeah, we're all in agreement, huh? So.
Yeah, you spend like so much of your life after you learn about these things just trying not to become despondent over it because it is just so awful.
Mm-hmm.
Like knowing the usury, the corruption, like that's happening to us that we can't do anything about it. At this stage, like the enforcement arm of the government has evolved to be so large and so strong that like anything that we try to do against it would just crush us. And it's hard not to over that.
Yeah.
The hard part is knowing the corruption and then trying to explain our perspective to someone who is just full of
someone whose eyes are shut and they're just asleep.
Yeah, well, they listen to the news on TikTok,
and
then it's just it gets in a tight spot.
Yeah, it makes you really, really empathize with what's the name of the main character in 1984 again? I can't remember his name.
Oh,
but
Wilson. I'm probably getting that wrong.
I'm not sure. It makes you really empathize with his character, though. Winston, yeah.
Yeah.
Because he gets to a point in the book where he sees, okay, now I know the corruption that's happening. I've seen the extent of it. But he simultaneously recognizes that there's nothing I can do about it. And when he finally gets that glimmer of hope, spoiler alert, I guess, but the book is like super old. So if you haven't read it by now, get good, son. But he recognizes all the corruption, but he also recognizes like, great, there's nothing I can do about it because they're too powerful. And once he finally gets this little glimmer of hope that something can be done about it, it's all an inside operation that ends up betraying him and basically throwing him right back into the system and brainwashing him all over again. And it's just so depressing. I remember finishing that book and being like, damn, that's depressing, but also being like, that's it though. That's the game. Like that's the game that we're currently playing. That's the tyranny we live under.
I think
that's why I'm so attracted to the idea of Christ like restoring everything.
Yeah.
At his second coming.
I'm a little more optimistic perhaps naive, but I have that advantage, I guess. I think we're going to.
There has to be a little bit of that.
Yeah,
I hope so. I really hope so. I want to be wrong about that.
Yeah.
Like I want it to be true that stuff is that we're gonna fix it. Like Robert Neville and I Am Legend. We're gonna fix this. You know, like I just don't know. I don't know if it's something that we'll be able to figure out without submitting to our creator.
Well,
Like I think in order for us to resolve these issues, we have to submit and like be washed, be made clean, be forgiven.
Well, I think
as a nation, not
yeah.
individuals.
Well, I think every generation has its fight. I think this is ours, and then we'll win or lose this thing, and if we lose, the end of the world happens because Russia and Ukraine, nuclear war, and all that good stuff. But if we win, there'll be another fight for the next generation, and that back and forth will go on until the end. But we're called to this time to fight, and I think we'll win this round. I mean, I never imagined people would hate the media as much as they do now. I mean, there's been progress. There's been a lot of progress, things I never thought I'd see in my lifetime. I mean, the JFK files are about to be released. I mean, I'm sure half of them will be redacted, but we already pretty well know that, the story's a lie. And that when I was a kid, I mean, good night. If you believe that JFK was assassinated by the CIA, you're a nut. Now it's like, well, duh. I never thought that was going to happen in my life.
Yeah. Like Seinfeld even made an episode about it, like making, like at the time, like in the mid-90s, I think, they had an episode out, like, basically making fun of Kramer for being the one delusional conspiracy theorist in the group that believed in the magic bouncing bullet theory about the Kennedy assassination.
Yeah.
They made him look like a loon. They made the crazy guy the only one who believes the theory on purpose. And, and same thing with MLK, too. That's another thing that we all know deep down, like, that man wasn't just assassinated by like some white supremacist dude.
Yeah.
He was actually well on his way to changing part of the character of American society, and feds didn't like that.
Mm-hmm. I don't think so at all.
He had to go.
Yeah.
You don't?
No.
Which part do you disagree with?
MLK. I think he was trying to make everybody feel like a victim.
Okay, so you think MLK's a bad guy. All right. You want to elaborate on that?
I think he was actually a Fed. And well, not a Fed, but he was put in place by the Feds.
Well, those files are coming out, so we'll see, won't we?
I'm very excited.
So when, like, for instance, when the FBI threatened him with like tapes that would have like revealed his adultery to his wife, do you think that was like MLK was stepping out of line with the plan they had together, so they had to whip him back into shape, or like what do you think that was about?
Probably blackmail that they got on him to make him do what they wanted.
Well, yeah, but then he ended up not doing what they wanted. That's what I'm saying. Like, why?
And then they killed him.
If he was put there. Yeah,
Okay,
but if he was put there by the feds, why would they have threatened him with that? Was he stepping out of line with the plan they made together? And if so, how?
I guess I don't understand the question.
Well, it's the FBI's action to MLK doesn't make any sense of him being a Fed. They killed him, then they blackmailed him. And from my own perspective, little I know about history, I mean, LBJ hated the fact that black people were getting the right to vote and all this. And I mean, once they actually had that equal standing in society legally, he immediately set about to destroy their culture. That's what was it? Great Leap Forward? Was that what it was? His prosperity program for them? Yeah. So, I mean, the fact that he was empowering African Americans, I don't think that set well with the Democrat Party. They have a history with that. They try to say there was a switch, but there wasn't.
They don't really empower him, though. They just tell him that the white man victimizes them.
Which you can thank LBJ for that. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, MLK was, LBJ didn't really care for the guy. And I don't
But also at the time of MLK's activism, right? So, like, for instance, things that resulted from MLK's work, like, what's it called? anyways, I'll get back to it. There are certain policies that resulted out of MLK's work that kind of turned into something that needed to be abrogated in today's day and age because they were providing like false equity. But also a lot of what he was working against was like something, the kind of oppression of human beings in society that is objectively wrong. Like there were a lot of abuses of the black population in America that he was seeking to not really expose because everybody saw it, but he wanted to change the hearts and minds of Americans to like see people regardless of race as like fellow human beings.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's gonna smack of victimhood to some people. And like maybe that the victimhood mentality did evolve out of the civil rights movement into like, BLM and a bunch of crap that we have nowadays. But
that's how we have the DEI now. It's the same thing.
I truly believe if we were somehow able to import MLK, his spirit straight into modern society, and we showed him what came of BLM, what came of like the Black Liberation Army in the 70s, I think he would be disgusted.
Sure.
Like I think he would have been truly, truly disgusted with what all that turned into.
My opinion is he was co-opted by the CIA, so that checks out.
I disagree with you, and I feel like I should point out that the African Americans may or may not have they didn't have a victim mentality, but they were victims. But the thing is, that oppression made them stronger. They had a more stable society than white people did at the time. I believe they were more religious. I believe their marriages were more stable. It wasn't until LBJ started doing that great leap forward stuff that their culture started to implode, which brings us back to hip-hop and Joe Rogan, which was the thing we were watching before, talking about the destruction
Can I
of...
make one more comment?
Yes.
Real quick. One more comment, and then we'll get back on topic. I know we've kind of gone off on a tangent, but
also...
one of the interesting things that come from your comment about like the black community whenever it comes to like their what they've contributed to as far as like moral fabric in society, like having that strong foundation. Have you heard of Dietrich Bonhoeffer? You know who that is?
Yes.
German pastor, World War II era.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that happened before he started doing, his work in earnest back in Germany is he came to the United States because he was a seminarian. He wanted to learn about like theological education that was happening in the United States. And part of his life's commentary is talking about how pretty much everywhere he went, especially on East Coast churches in the United States, as far as like the Christian religion in the United States went, he was horrified by it because it was being like liberalized, secularized, like turned into basically just like, Jesus is a great moral teacher, but a bunch of this stuff about him dying and rising again is just mythology. But it was when he went to visit like the primarily black churches in the South that he saw that the belief and faith in Christ in terms of his life, death, and resurrection was still like very, very alive. That kind of speaks to what you were talking about a minute ago. Like there was an era in United States history, and part of it continues today. There was an era wherein like the black population in the United States was like heavily responsible for, keeping legitimate Protestantism alive in the United States and not ceding it over to liberals.
Yeah.
Secularists.
From what I understand, there was a period where they were much more virtuous and stable than the white communities were. So yeah, and then
obviously it's not a blanket thing. It's not true of all of them everywhere, but there are a lot of the black community.
Yeah.
If that's true, then wouldn't the CIA want to disrupt that?
Which brings us back to Joe Rogan.
Hey, before you hit play.
Yes.
Jen made it back. She's in the chat.
Oh, hi, Jen.
She asked how we're all doing.
We are fantastic. Bickering like always. How are you? All right, so let's see if we can get to the hip-hop portion where the CIA tries to destroy the black culture.
2017, when Trump was wiping out ISIS, that put a $10 million bounty on the head of Mohammed al-Jilani, the commander of those forces, the current basically head of state in the interim government in Syria. There was a $10 million bounty on his head under Trump. They made the argument that his HTS group was an al-Qaeda spinoff and no al-Qaeda allowed. Well, according to his own military generals, who said this openly in mainstream media after the fact. We were constantly playing shell games with the numbers to hide the troop activity and what we were doing on the ground in Syria and the broader region. If you don't need a presidential finding to finance a terrorist group or a paramilitary group, it's too dirty for CIA. President won't approve. Run it through USAID.
And what does this have to do with hip hop?
Well, you have these narco networks.
Oh my goodness.
Like, for example, like what I was saying about the USAID bought the airplanes for the CIA, for the wholesalers to move it to the retailers. And when you have this intersection between hip hop and the drug economy, hip hop popularizing it, you have a lot of these rappers who've said, we were told by our promoters or our managers to, lean into that stuff. You have the whole organized crime gang. I'll give you an example. This is in Gary Webb's Dark Alliance, where he goes through this network from basically the CIA playing and the Defense Department playing a leading role in propping up these narcotics trades in South America because they were pumping up right-wing death squads and right-wing paramilitary narco gang networks that were violent and effectively shut down left-wing Marxist theology movements who were considered to be pro-Soviet. This is how you have a lot of this, for example, with Iran-Contra and the Reagan years. So he makes a very compelling case about the role of the U.S. intelligence community at the wholesale level in Peru and Bolivia, and at the actual processing in Colombia, and then the movement and transport to the gangs in Los Angeles and Miami and Chicago and the like. And that wholesale movement effectively goes from Langley / Crystal City in D.C., Virginia, to a sort of Hispanic population in South America, into gangs that are retailing it into these Compton gangs, into these these Chicago and Miami and New York ones.
Gangsters.
You have a culture of drug use that creates a market for selling the proceeds so that drugs can be turned into cash, which can then be used to purchase guns. And when you see this just liquid seamlessness there, and then I don't want to tax Jamie too much, but this gray zone report in Bangladesh has specific language with the National Endowment for Democracy and one of its subarms making explicit grants to Bangladeshi rap groups for the explicit purpose of getting people to take to the streets in street riots and protest movements, and to undermine public faith and public confidence and favorable sentiment for the then in power Bangladeshi government. And they were targeting the youth movements. Remember when we pulled up the
Yes.
What he's talking about there with like the Bangladeshi hip hop groups, which without context, like if somebody's just now jumping in, would sound like wild. But what he's talking about with like their lyrics, kind of like inspiring people and inciting people, like take to the streets, break stuff, Limp Bizkit style, like, out in the streets. Yeah. That reminds me of something else that USAID has been discovered to have done. I forgot the name of the app. I'm going to try to look it up. But they have been found to have funded, within the past couple of years, a Twitter-style app for citizens of Cuba. Because people in Cuba don't have X. They weren't really allowed to have like a lot of access to apps like Twitter.
Right.
But this app just sort of popped up in the last few years in Cuba that basically has all the same functions as X, where people can share like, all of their ideas and stuff like that. And basically what the idea is, the leading theory, because of all of our history with Cuba, with trying to destabilize them politically and assassinate their leaders for decade after decade after decade, The idea is that why would the U.S. be funding a social media app in Cuba? To get them to do exactly what he's talking about with these rap groups in Bangladesh, like use the app to shoot information like onto the screens of Cuban residents all over their little, island country to take to the streets and overthrow the regime.
Yeah.
Like that's so, because there are people who are so willfully, either they're scared to admit they know the truth or they're willfully ignorant that they'll honestly say like, oh, out of the goodness of the United States heart, we were just trying to give these poor Cubans social media so that they could communicate with each other just like we do in the America, just like we do in the United States. Like, no. Why do you think we weren't told about it? Like, if it was just us doing this nice thing for them, why weren't the American people being told that our tax dollars were being used to do something nice for Cubans? No, we weren't told because it was being used to do what Mike is talking about here, to basically push like motivation to cause like social unrest and political upheaval. Like USAID is all over that, all over that.
Yep. So, should we
But
go
they
on?
feed poor people, man. So we need to let them hang around.
Yeah. So, should we go on, or have we established the point as to how they're operating? Does everybody understand what's going on? Somewhat.
I mean, yeah, the CIA is still subverting and selling drugs and corrupting people.
It's just amazing.
CIA
It's all coming out in
doing
public.
CIA stuff.
Yeah. It's like we all suspect it, but we're not allowed to say it, except until now, anyway. So.
Yeah.
Well, I think that pretty well covers it. I had a lot more I wanted to say about it, but we still got one more topic to cover, and we're about
one more
3 hours
topic.
in. So we're gonna go ahead and wrap this part 2 up, boys and girls. So,
Jen just said, "Yep, the '80s was crazy. Program come into play to get kids to read, not to do drugs."
Yeah.
Based.
Yeah. We've also been doing this kind of stuff in Africa as well. I don't know if you guys have heard of Andrew Wilson from The Crucible on YouTube.
No.
But he talks about this, one of the activities that the U.S. government was up to when the principle of depop, like depopulation, started to become super popular in, the cultural zeitgeist. Like, we got to have less people. There's too many people.
But not me.
The U.S. government actually... Yeah, exactly. The U.S. government actually facilitated dropping these little pamphlets called the population bomb all over Africa, trying to get Africans to stop, generating more people, like trying to get them to stop.
They've been trying to stop people from doing that for years with vaccines.
Oh, we're not allowed to say that, Cody. Shh. Shh.
He just gets like blown out the back of his wall.
Yeah.
just call them vacations. We'll know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Just say vacations or the jibby jab.
I
Has the
can't.
algorithm caught the jibby jab yet?
I don't know how to censor myself, guys. I'm sorry.
Jen said she lived in the ghetto at the time.
Yeah, there's a lot of funny business going on, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, I think we're going to move on to part 3.
Part 3.
Part 3.
Everybody, we're not leaving. This is just a break.
We're not leaving.
This is just a break, so I don't have to edit as much. So, okay, here we go. Guys, thank you so much for watching. And the CIA ships drugs. Good night. No. So. All right, so on to part 3. Trevor, lead us into this episode, good sir.
All right, are we ready?
I'm ready, yes.
Yep.
All right, so
no, you gotta do there you go. You gotta say welcome to Faith Fiction Folklore.
Welcome to the channel Faith Fiction and Folklore, where we try not to F things up, also called the Try F Podcast. And tonight we've got Gary and Jeremiah and Cody with us. Thank you all for being here. How are you guys doing?
Superb.
Doing great.
Awesome.
With a different
So,
vibe here.
anyways, we're going to talk about, at this time, Valentine's Day and kind of the history of it, and do a deep dive on Valentine's Day. since yesterday was Valentine's Day.
Sweet. So on this episode 3 of the live stream, which video would you like me to start with first, Trevor? Do you want me to go in the order of the links, starting with the History Channel?
Go in the order of the links I sent you. So start with the History Channel one.
All right, great.
And this is just a basic overview from the History Channel's perspective.
Sweet. All righty, here we go. After the ad that I'm sure is going to show up after I hit play.
Oh, there's going to be 50 in this ad, in this video.
No, it's only a few minutes long.
For all its popularity, history doesn't give us any guarantees as to the origin.
That's going to hit us with a copyright, just so you know, but oh well.
Of Valentine's Day.
I didn't even think about that.
But we do know it contains vestiges of the early Christian church in ancient Rome. The association between mid-February and romance goes back to a pagan festival known as Lupercalia, likely honoring either Lupa, the she-wolf of Rome, who suckled Romulus and Remus, or Faunus, their god of fertility.
Wasn't Rome such a delightful time? Just awesome.
Yes, it was.
The festivities began with an animal sacrifice. Then the ritualistic slapping of young women with strips of the animal's skin and blood to bestow fertility for the coming year. In the 5th century, perhaps in an effort to Christianize.
That's what I was thinking, but why though? We're going to sacrifice a goat?
For a second, I was like starting to groove to the music a little bit. And it was like the slapping of young women with animals. Like, oh my God.
Threw me off, yeah. Broke the trance a little bit. Wait, what? Yes, we're going to sacrifice a goat and beat our women. Yay, Rome!
The pagan festival, Pope Gelasius declared February 14th as St. Valentine's Day. As for the real St. Valentine, there were reportedly several canonized by the Church. Legend has it that one St. Valentine, a defiant Roman priest, lived during the 3rd century AD under Emperor Claudius II. Claudius was an ambitious ruler. His battles required vast armies of men to abandon their young families for long periods of time, resulting in a military that was half-hearted and homesick. So determined was Claudius to stop love from sapping the will of his armies, he banned marriages altogether. Father Valentine.
Sure. So, Pope bans marriages. Well, I thought Francis was bad.
Did it say the Pope banned marriages or Emperor?
I might have misheard that. Hopefully it was the Emperor, because I thought he said the Pope. It was Claudius II, whoever that was.
Yeah, that's Emperor. That's the Emperor of Rome.
Never mind, I'm an idiot. Yeah. I heard Pope, so never mind. Ignore me, guys.
Together. Father Valentine thought the ban unjust and defied the Emperor,
yeah, you're right.
continuing to marry young lovers in secret. The Emperor eventually caught on to the priest's actions, arrested him, and sentenced him to death. It is believed that young couples he had secretly wed would visit his cell, passing him flowers and notes through the bars as symbols of their gratitude. The story continues that the condemned Father Valentine fell in love with his jailer's daughter. On February 14th, the day he was executed, it is said he passed the young girl a note. It was signed, "From your Valentine." A tradition was born. Cupid.
Well, that's really depressing.
Sounds like BS.
It does sound a little romantic.
I think the "From your Valentine" thing, yeah, I think that part's kind of made up whole cloth. But the idea that a priest would be assisting in, helping Roman soldiers to marry, the women that they love in secret because a decree came down from the emperor saying, no, you have to be a fighting man only. You can never get married. Like, that's entirely plausible to me because, like, Rome would do stuff like that to keep their soldiers dedicated to the cause. So, and plus, especially the early Christian church, they had, like, a very high view of marriage.
Yeah.
Marriage. So they wanted that to happen. Wings up together. No, so that part of the story seems very plausible to me that there is like a priest like helping to facilitate Christian marriages, which probably ended up bringing a lot of Roman soldiers into the church in the first place. Well, if I can't marry my sweetheart, out in public society because this law has just been passed down saying I can't, like, damn, that's really depressing. And then they find this option that will help them, that will allow them to be married to the person that they love. And it's a different religion entirely. So for a lot of Roman soldiers, that was probably their introduction into the Christian church, was like being dedicated to this idea of marrying the woman they love. And then discovering a group of people that were like, we can help you do that, but we're not pagans. So
what's that mean though? Like
what
constituted being married back then?
Well, hopefully not getting beat with whips.
I mean, our current day is like it's under the law of the land, which would have been the Greeks. So I don't really understand that.
In the context of the church, when you think about it, marriage is and always has been a sacrament. Marriage was never originally created by a sect. Gotcha. It was never created as a construct by a secular government. Marriage has always been a religious construct, a religious sacrament. So that's how it started, right? So you had pagan religions that had something that would constitute marriage, but the Jews and the Christians also have this construct. And Christianity has always taught just like this dramatically high view of marriage, because the Christian church from the beginning has taught that when a husband and a wife marry, they become one flesh, and they are working with each other to draw closer to God, to deny more of themselves and draw closer to God. So like marriage is, the way the church will phrase it, is to aid in theosis and becoming more like the person God intended you to be. So they would never outlaw it, because it has this glorious purpose. So they would have seen Claudius II's, ruling about outlawing marriage as not just detestable or not just like objectionable, but monstrous. Like they would have seen it as like a crime against human civilization. So they, of course, would have continued to keep facilitating marriage. That's kind of why I was saying it's entirely plausible to me that they were priests. And Valentine probably wasn't the only one who was, facilitating these marriages. He was just one of the ones that got caught, it seems like.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, but marriage has always been a religious thing. The state, the way we have it now, like most Americans see marriage as like, oh, it's just something Americans do for tax purposes. Like, no, that's the depressing way that the secular world teaches us to view marriage. But religiously, marriage is a beautiful thing. It is for our betterment. It's for us to work together to better each other and to draw closer to God. That's why it's like becoming one flesh. We make our decisions together. We're one flesh. We do everything together. It's a beautiful thing, not something to be depressed about. That's what the state turns it into, and that's why the United States made a horrible mistake continuing in the tradition of allowing the state to be dominant over the construct of marriage.
Yeah.
Always remain religious.
Wouldn't that be the mixing of church and state?
Well, honestly, I believe the church should rule the world. So
well, that's creepy.
No
way.
Well, if the church is the bride of Christ, I couldn't think of a better group of people to be in charge.
Which church, though?
That's the debate we were having the last time I was on here.
Oh, okay.
My view.
I feel like Christ kind of said it was like the church was within yourself.
How? How do you draw that conclusion?
What do you mean? He said it.
How do you draw the conclusion that Christ said the church is within yourself? You never
like
said
the kingdom is within yourself. You are the church.
No, the kingdom and the church, he didn't use those two words interchangeably. The church always meant the body. He didn't say that your body is the temple. Your body is the temple, but like that's a spiritual sense, because there is also a physical temple. And the temple and church, the church, do you know where the word church comes from? Like where we get that word?
No.
It's a Greek word, ecclesia. It comes from two words, ek and kaleo. And I'm not a Greek scholar, like I said the last time I was on. This is just one of the ones I happen to know about. But ecclesia doesn't mean a building. It doesn't mean necessarily just a group of people. Ecclesia in Greek translation means the called forth ones, or the ones who were called forth. It's talking about a body of people. So when that word ecclesia that gets translated as church in English is used in the New Testament, it's not talking about something that just exists inside an individual believer. When ecclesia is used in Scripture, when church is used in Scripture, it's talking about the called forth ones, a body of people, a body of believers. However, when I said that this body of believers, would be my preferred rule over society, I don't subscribe to the belief that Christianity should be spread by force, like it has been, regrettably, in various instances in history. That's why I was saying, like, I really don't think a lot of the problems we're dealing with in the world today will be solved until Christ's second coming. Because when the church does, rule over the world, it's not going to be in subjecting other people. It's going to be because everybody who is left in the new heavens and the new earth willfully submits to God and accepts his rule as their king. Like, that's the new heavens and the new earth. Like, that's the eternity that we look forward to.
But isn't that what we talked about earlier? Like, Thomas thought the kingdom was physical, and that's what messed him up. You just don't agree with that?
No, a bunch of the apostles were expecting a Messiah to show up in a military fashion to boot Rome out of society. That's what they were expecting.
What I missed,
but
boys
Christ
and
didn't
girls.
show up as a military leader. A lot.
A lot?
But, yeah. He didn't show up as a military leader to subject everyone, but at the same time, in the eschaton, in the second coming, when the new heavens and the new earth are ushered in, like, there will be that final judgment, and his enemies will, the people who still reject him to the end, will be burned up in judgment, and all that will be left are those who have followed Christ.
But so that's what Judas thought was going to happen, right?
We're not talking about Valentine's Day, are we?
It led from one to the other.
It led from Valentine's Day.
We talked a lot about it.
Oh, okay.
And marriage, and then
from.
Oh, never mind.
Okay.
Not important.
Well, it sounded pretty important.
Yeah.
I've got some dire warnings from Revelations, and I was like, well, this ain't Valentine's conversation at all. So.
We were talking about, these marriages that St. Valentine would conduct in secret with Roman soldiers, because, the Christian church is always viewed, I'll give like the Spark Notes edition of what I was just talking about.
Okay.
But the church has always viewed religion as a sacrament, as a man and a woman becoming one flesh. And they're together on everything forever after that. Like, they have become one flesh. It's a religious sacrament. So when the Roman emperor outlawed that, the Christian church in Rome would have seen that as a monstrous attack against God's created order.
Yeah.
So, of course, the church would have never gone along with this ruling.
Right.
So it makes sense that priests within Roman society would have continued to facilitate weddings.
Which is why I was so thrown off with the whole Pope thing, like Pope canceling marriage. I was like, what? No, that can't be.
Yeah.
Right. So, okay.
Yeah, at the time of St. Valentine, there was a Roman bishop, but the idea of the papacy wasn't really, like, the idea of the papacy being the universal jurisdiction of the church, that wasn't a thing at this point in history. This was like late AD 200s.
Yeah, so I was just being an idiot and misunderstanding what I heard. But anywho, so
there is a lot of so-and-so the second and so-and-so the thirds in the papal line, though, so I could understand why you would have thought that at first.
Yeah, well, it's okay. You can just call me an idiot, but I appreciate it. So
I refuse.
All right, so are we done with the church conversation then? Have we moved on from that and chased it down?
Yeah. That was just a tangent we went on while you were gone.
Sweet. So we're ready to return to the video then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sweet. Here we go.
The winged matchmaker started out as the Roman god of love, inspired the image of cherubs for Christians, and is now a favorite of card makers and mass marketers. Our modern Valentine's Day, removed from its religious and pagan past, has evolved into one of the most celebrated holidays on the calendar. On average, Americans shower their loved ones with 180 million roses, red ones naturally, and almost 36 million heart-shaped boxes of candy, not to mention all those cards, dinners, and diamonds.
Sorry, can you pause?
All told,
That's cracking me up, man. You notice like the intense, like menacing, like EDM, like when I was explaining like the Christian origin of the holiday, and then as soon as it goes to like, but now removed from religion entirely, it's this Hallmark music, flowers and chocolate everywhere kind of thing. Like I know what you're doing, History Channel, like, a bunch of secular bastards.
We ran into that before with the Halloween one. It was, I remember that? They were like, oh, the Romans were just trying to integrate culture, but the Christians, through conquest and propaganda. Yeah.
Oh, don't worry. The next video goes into deeper, darker things of it.
Oh, sweet. Well, let's get into that.
Yeah.
So, let's see.
Jen in the chat has been married for 33 years. Illuminati confirmed, boys.
Well, Illuminati aside, congratulations. So,
Indeed. Very good. Many years to you.
She said she hopes to get laid later.
Well, there you go. And it's proper context, too. Excellent. So, all right, let's see here. The dark origin and history of St. Valentine's Day.
Valentine's Day. We all know it as a time to celebrate romance and love. But the origins of this festival of roses, chocolate, and Cupid are actually quite dark. In fact, bloody. So what exactly is the story behind this lovey-dovey holiday? We'll have to take a trip to ancient Rome. But before we get going, please like and subscribe.
No.
Yeah, before we get into the macabre stuff, let's like and subscribe, guys. History biography. Yeah, and share. History, biography, and mythology if you are so inclined, by the way.
Ancient Rome, a place of diverse, rich culture and history, inspired by the many gods, Jupiter.
You do realize this is another AI video, Trevor. We fell for this once already.
Yeah. If you want to skip this one. The next one basically says all the same stuff she does, but it's not AI.
Well, let's try to honor the work of a person. I mean, I guess somebody made the AI, but I feel cheated.
She just goes into the darker things of it. Okay. This guy doesn't really go as dark as she did.
Okay, so the history of Valentine's Day, a pagan. Are we going to hear more about whips and people being beat?
Probably.
That's going to be depressing.
That was kind of funny.
Sexist.
This one is the deepest dive I could find. So.
All right. Here we go.
Let's dive deeply.
It's important that as we live out our days, we grow in knowledge. It's always a mistake to partake in customs and celebrations that we do not know the history of. Embracing traditions that we do not know the history of can often lead us in celebrating false deities and make us out to be hypocrites to what we truly believe. Knowledge is power, and regardless of what you choose to do.
Question for the Greek Orthodox. I'm going to go Romans 14 on this. What do you think? You think that's a thing? If we unwittingly worship a pagan holiday, it's like, God or something? Like we're falsely worshiping a god? I don't subscribe to that, but what do you guys think?
Like if you listen to Snoop Dogg, because he's the modern incarnation of Anubis, the dog-headed god of Egypt. If you listen to Snoop Dogg, you're worshiping Anubis.
Well, I don't listen to Snoop Dogg, so there's that. What about you, Jeremiah? I'm curious for your opinion.
As soon as he was talking about the connection between Snoop Dogg and Anubis, I just imagined like an archaeologist like in an ancient Egyptian tomb. It's like, I heard a voice in the dark in my ear. You'd be sipping on gin and juice.
I was sitting there thinking, do I touch that? Do I not touch that? Do I really want to chase that rabbit?
But there's an extent to which I agree that whenever it comes to participating in like modern holidays, you should know the origin of the holiday. You should know where the practices come from. But there's also part of me that, you know, like on Halloween, for instance, we know that one side of the origin of Halloween comes from Catholicism, you know, All Hallows Eve, and it was a celebration of saints in the church. But there's also a connection to Samhain, or some people pronounce it Samhain, and that's a very explicitly pagan festival that dealt with familiar spirits and, you know, ghouls, goblins, monsters, that kind of thing. All that being said, when I have like a group of little kids come to my door and they're dressed up in cute little costumes on Halloween night, and they say trick or treat, and I give them a handful of Tootsie Rolls, and my wife and I watch them walk off, like, I don't think there is anything like any kind of pagan worship in that. You know, like, I don't think giving a kid a dum-dum and saying like, oh, you're dressed up like Buzz Lightyear. Like, I don't think there's like a demon sitting in the corner going like, you know, like, that doesn't check out to me. But
one could argue that you are tempting those children to the demon gluttony
through candy.
Yeah,
but you could say that with giving them food in general too.
Yeah, I mean,
gluttony doesn't just have to do with candy; it has to do with food. So, like, if I give a kid a sandwich, but he looks well fed.
The candy's not because they're hungry. The candy's because it's an oral tradition, which is, I mean, the basic synopsis of what we're saying. It's an oral tradition or a ritual that we're following because it's a tradition or ritual, and so, you know, a demon or whatever can use that, you know, for
So the part of Halloween, like, I know I'm zeroing in on a particular holiday. It's the same thing with a lot of holidays. It's just a lot of American holidays are very modern. Some of them come from modern origins, but with Halloween in particular, the dark side of that could be like the glorification of death that, you know, even I've been guilty of to an extent. Like, you know, for like as far back as I can remember, every you know, October, like when the AMC does the horror movie marathons and stuff like that, like I was all over that, and maybe I shouldn't be, you know, because perhaps like that, you know, macabre kind of aspect is wrong-headed, and we shouldn't be engaging with that.
If that's the case, I am in real trouble, because I've got an entire 6-book literary series that's all monsters and horror stuff. I might be in a little bit of trouble if we're not supposed to focus on the macabre.
The thing is, like, you can make like horror and scary stories that have a redemptive aspect and like a good lesson, you know, some kind of good moral, like you can reap something good out of that. But stuff that's like horrifying for the sake of being horrifying, you know, that we do on Halloween, like the Michael Myers anthology.
Oh yeah,
like all of those
slasher
movies
films and stuff. Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, those movies never have a good ending. It's always something horrible. There's no redeeming aspect of it. Like, sometimes there's interesting elements about like what makes a human, like the last like 3 Halloween movies that came out talked a lot about like what made somebody like actually evil and where does evil come from. And it was an interesting philosophical conversation that you get to have if you really think about it.
Yeah.
You know, like Jay Dyer level analysis. But stuff that's just gory and like disfiguring the image of God by like, you know, cutting somebody to pieces or like doing all these horrible things to them in these movies that people get really into on Halloween, I could definitely see how that could like open up channels for demonic activity in somebody's life.
Yeah, it lowers your vibration, man.
Yeah, there is a glorification of evil that needs to be avoided.
Yeah, like one thing that we know from like loads of accounts, like loads of modern accounts of people becoming, you know, possessed, or not even possessed, but like oppressed by demons. A common factor among a lot of them is that they read horror novels or they watched horror movies where they engaged in occult activities that they didn't know were occult, like Ouija boards and stuff like that. So these things that we see as like fun kind of just like seasonal activities, like horror movies that just like don't have any redeeming aspect to them, or occult activities that we think are just like fun Hasbro board games. You know, they could actually be opening up channels for the demonic.
Well, let me tie this into Valentine's Day. Does Valentine's Day tempt people into lust?
Oh, yes.
Modern, yeah.
So should we celebrate it?
The modern iteration for sure.
Yeah.
Probably not.
Probably not. Interesting.
I would vote taking it back to like a church holiday. Obviously, in our secular modern world, people aren't going to be super interested in a church holiday. But I think the saintly origin of the holiday, like what Saint Valentine, according to church tradition, is attested to have done with his life, I think that's an incredibly honorable thing. And I think it would behoove all of us to remember like valiant men like that in world history that did great things for people.
Mm-hmm.
So if we adjusted it to that, that would be great. But like I said, modern world, I don't think they'd be super duper interested in that. They'd rather have their really, goofy Hallmark movies that come out every year.
Those are the worst.
And chocolates and
heck, and Hallmark Christmas counts as Valentine's Day too, and Hallmark every holiday is Valentine's Day. So
yeah,
I hate that channel.
There's always some chick who owns like a snow globe shop, and like some like corporate dude that's like super greedy and a workaholic comes into town like, I don't have time to love you. I'm doing business over the phone.
Yeah. Don't forget that midway low point where she's like, I can't believe you did that thing. That's an obvious misunderstanding. I'm out of here. But I love you. So, okay.
It's always a businessman in a small town somebody. That's the line.
It's the same movie over and over again. Okay, so let me posit a question. We're just spitballing here. I'm not making a definitive doctrinal statement or even a theological opinion. I am throwing this on the board to see what y'all think. What if maybe we should celebrate these holidays? Because obviously there's an equivalent. Like with Halloween, there was like a Christian version of that at one point. And then with St. Valentine's Day, obviously the theme is marriage. So to cease worshiping them, celebrating them, I've already baited my own premise, celebrating them, what if that's seeding ground? Like what if we're giving those holidays to the secular culture by refusing to celebrate them? And go.
Yeah, by refusing to celebrate them without replacing them to something else is like almost, it sounds heavy, but it's almost nihilist behavior to just be like, well, it used to be this thing that was honorable, but now it's not, so let's give up on it. I think if we're going to take away something, pagan or something degenerate from society, that leaves a vacuum which should be filled with something honorable.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I was saying a minute ago with Valentine's Day in particular, we take away the lust, we take away all the OF, 304s on the internet,
mm-hmm.
and we replace that with honoring, a great man who did a great thing, helping to facilitate true love, between a man and a woman, like helping them to become married to each other in a state that wouldn't really allow them to. Like, that sounds like the subject matter of a romance novel. It really does. There's plenty of romance in that by itself. So I think the true story, specifically Valentine's Day, is the best story. We should return to that.
Well, there you go. You guys had
My
mischievous smiles
colostrum.
there for a sec. Colostrum. Anyway, is that your it's a holiday now? Or is that just shorthand for Christmas?
Colostrum Santa Day.
Merry Colostrum.
Merry.
All a good night.
Get your nutrients.
Yeah, get your nutrients.
Let the nutrients travel up your spine.
I don't know what that means. You say these things, and I'm like, what are you talking about? So, you guys had mischievous laughs. What's going on? Like, you guys are like a bunch of middle schoolers. What's happening?
Jen said, the one horror movie that plugs my nerves, I guessed My Bloody Valentines. She said nothing special about any of the rest of them. I never seen The Walking Dead, but when it came out, I rolled my eyes. And so I was like, The Walking Dead is a great show, and Cody was like, no, it's not.
You guys weren't even having a conversation related to this. I don't even know why I try. Good night. It's like, hey, we're talking about whether or not we should keep celebrating holidays to save the culture. We're talking about The Walking Dead. I'm like, oh, great. That's good.
I can do both.
Yeah, you can do both. You can multitask, and you can talk about colostrum too.
Well, you do bring up something which could be an entire podcast worth of material in and of itself. Like, and not just with holidays, but with a lot of other cultural aspects too. Like, do we just give up because these things that used to be great have been turned into shite?
Mm-hmm.
Or do we bring things back to the way they were? There sort of has to be this attitude which is kind of frowned upon these days because people see it as, colonialist, imperialist, supremacist, whatever. But there has to be an attitude that comes from the people who built Western society to be like, what made this great? Oh, yeah, it's these things. It's faith. It's the family. Like, we need to take it back and not just give it up to the degens.
Yeah.
Like, there needs... Like, I was talking earlier about how despondent, or how tempted to be despondent I can get when I see the corruption in our government. I talk like that because the seriousness, the gravity of the matter deserves, that serious tone. But by no means should that be interpreted as me saying, I give up, everything sucks, it's the worst.
Mm-hmm.
I say things the way that I say them in regards to all of that to kind of, evoke something in the people who hear me out.
Yeah.
We need to take things back.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be a fight. Don't go silent into that cold night. You have to do something. Look at society the way that it has been for the past few years. It really seemed like at a few points that we were in our death throes. Mm-hmm. It really did.
Yeah.
Now I'm not so sure because there seems to be a little bit of a revival. But for a while, when I was looking at the craziness, I was like, it really seems like we're in our final moments here. And it was starting to freak me out a little bit. But that's what inspires me so much about what's happening now. It's not vested in any one person. It's not vested in Trump or Mike Benz or any of the people that are doing the work, but in the collective that is starting to wake up and do something about the dire situation they found themselves in.
Mm-hmm.
It happens with holidays, happens with all manner of cultural customs. It happens with faith. That's why even non-Christian, secular people who are waking up are starting to recognize the importance of the church in America. Richard Dawkins, he's not an American, but he's still a Westerner. Even he has woken up and said, I'm not a Christian, but I'm a cultural Christian.
Yeah.
Because I have recognized the importance. I have a book right now on my desk by an atheist scholar named Tom Holland.
Mm-hmm.
Wrote an entire book
Spider-Man?
about the influence.
Close.
No, not the Tom Holland Spider-Man. Yeah. Scholar Tom Holland wrote an entire book called Dominion about the influence of Christianity on the world. And he's one of those atheists that came to the conclusion after his historical deep dive, we need faith. We need this rootedness. Even if you don't believe it, it's necessary. We got to win.
Logically. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. We got to take things back. We can't let it fall to foundationless relativism, because that just leads to disaster.
So, boys and girls, sign that Valentine's Day card. Take that rejection from your lover like a man or woman.
Yeah,
endure the hardship.
Send the Valentine's Day card.
Jen said we don't need all the holidays.
Not all of them.
That's an interesting question. That is an interesting question. Do we need holidays?
No, they keep letting, my kids have off school on Monday for President's Day.
Well, see, that's just completely
who
utilitarian.
cares? Yeah.
Hey, if you were a child, you'd care a lot.
Giving up the Panama Canal. So that's something that really... Stupid. Yeah, government holidays really blow my mind. Because we'll reject the religious traditions that led to holidays like Christmas, All Hallows Eve, Valentine's Day. We'll say religion, we're done with that. But a day honoring our federal overlords, chef's kiss.
I am
Let's
really...
let the kids off of school have a barbecue.
Yeah.
I have a real emotional attachment to National Pretzel Day, I'll tell you what. So...
Oh, Stanley from The Office. Pretzel Day.
No, I will say there is one holiday that I think is of the utmost importance and should be celebrated at all costs, and is dwindling. That's Thanksgiving. People need a day to sit down, quit complaining about all the stuff they don't have, and to be thankful for something. And you got to make people sit their butts down and take the time to do it. And food is great bait. So I say we should celebrate Thanksgiving.
Is important.
Yeah, absolutely. So
every time
Thanksgiving is definitely one of the wholesome ones.
Yeah, every time my mom wants us to go around the table and be thankful for what we are thankful for, I'm like, I'm uncomfortable.
Yeah,
I hate it, but it's good for you.
Yeah, it seems cringy when it's happening, but it's the kind of thing that like 10, 15, 20 years from now, when you remember, like if that memory pops back into your head, like, the last big Thanksgiving where we were all together, like I should have said this, I should have said that, because like it makes you cringe to like do like that kind of hallmarky stuff, like, so guys, what are you thankful for? But it's valuable.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's a lot to be thankful for. Like if you assess your life without this BS, kind of like self-deprecating, like nihilist lens, like you can find a million things to be super thankful about.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what I have to remember with like, when so much was going wrong, especially while I was still in Tulsa, like we almost lost our daughter, the sale of our house almost fell through, all these terrible things were happening. And it just felt like at some points, like there's just nothing to be thankful for. It just seems like we're in this huge mess right now. That's how it seemed like I should have felt. But how I ended up feeling like when all of that was happening was realizing he's really there. He's really there, isn't he? Because somehow when all of that was happening, when my daughter almost died, when we almost lost the sale of our house, when we almost went bankrupt and lost everything, we were still provided for. Things lined up at the perfect time in the perfect places. Providence took care of us. I had something to be thankful for. So now every time I get asked that question, I fight the cringe. I fight the cringe so hard. I want to cringe right now, but I'm not going to. I am thankful for everything.
Yeah.
God bless. Like, there's so much to be thankful for. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanksgiving is one of my favorite holidays for that.
Yeah.
Love that.
Jen asks, do we need St. Patrick's Day or do we keep that one? I know it's an Irish.
People use it as an excuse to drink.
Yeah, but the origin of that is pretty cool too.
Yeah.
Origin of St. Patty's Day is pretty great.
Yeah.
A lot of people, I know I'm taking up a lot of, like I'm talking a lot. So
no,
just
you're good.
Stop me if I talk.
You're good.
Yeah, shut up, man.
That's why you're here.
I will say on St. Patrick's Day, that's the day my wife and I got married, so I do kind of need that one.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah, that adds to it, man. That's awesome. But yeah, St. Pat's Day, that a lot of people, especially like neo-pagans, will look at that and be like, oh, it was peaceful, hippy-dippy pagans being driven out of Ireland by the imperialist Christians. Like, no. These were not pagans sitting in their little sewing circles or weaving baskets, and then the colonialists showed up and ruined everything. These were people who were committing vile acts of human sacrifice, sexual immorality, defiling the land with their degeneracy. And then St. Patrick showed up, just like the Spanish conquistadors did in the Americas, and went, sorry, the human sacrifices will stop. Like, he was part of that wave. And he didn't just bring domination and conquest to Ireland. He didn't drive out paganism and leave nothing in its wake. He brought Christ with him. Let me, you guys talk for a second, but there's a particular quote from St. Patrick that I want to read about his motivation for doing everything. It's just beautiful. I think you guys would like it.
Jen said Leif Erikson Day or something like that.
Happy Leif Erikson Day.
Leif Erikson Day.
Dinga-dinga-durgan.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah, that's the...
Look at me,
that's
wooden
the
shoes.
first... Yeah, that's the first Northman to make it to the Americas, I believe. And he converted to Christianity. He was the first Norse pagan convert to Christianity.
Interesting. Well, how about...
Oh, but... what's up?
Oh, I was going to say, well, how about we suggest this? How about if we maybe correlate these holidays with ideals? So instead of lust, we can be more focusing on marriage. I don't know what the ideal for Halloween would be, but we could think of something.
Lustful marriage.
Lustful
The
marriage.
original ideal for Halloween was to just honor, Christian heroes. Like All Hallows Eve, that was the original idea of the holiday from the Christian perspective, is like, this is the day that we use to honor like valiant Christian heroes in our history.
Well, there you go. Remembering the past on Halloween, gratitude for Thanksgiving, generosity for Christmas. Yeah, make it work. That's the way it used to be. I suspect that's the way it used to be. And then the corporations were like, we got to get these people to buy stuff. So
yeah.
Like with Saint Patrick in particular, that quote I wanted to read. Like I said, he didn't just bring desolation, violence, conquest to Ireland. Like he didn't bring any of that at all. Really, that came with their own internal wars, like later in history. But what Christ brought, or what Saint Patrick brought to Ireland was Christ. Like he wanted to evangelize with love, because he truly thought that was the only chance of salvation for the world. But his quote, what he's most famous for quoting, is the prayer that's been recorded and carried in both the Western and Eastern Christian traditions. But he starts with Christ with me, Christ before me, Christ behind me, Christ in me, Christ beneath me, Christ above me, Christ on my right, on my left, Christ where I lie, where I sit, where I rise, in the heart of everyone who thinks of me, Christ in the mouth of everyone who speaks to me, Christ in every eye that sees me, Christ in every ear that hears me. Salvation is of the Lord, salvation is of the Christ. May your salvation, Lord, ever be with us. So his whole attitude was, I'm going to bring Christ to people, but he also recognized that scripture we were talking about the last time we were all on together, where when you clothe the naked, feed the hungry, you take care of these people, you are serving God. You are serving Christ directly by doing that. So he very much had that attitude. So when he showed up to drive the snakes out of Ireland, yes, paganism was driven out of Ireland, but it was by a superior faith, by a superior, religion.
Mm-hmm.
Like something that saw the value and inherent dignity in the human being. So, like, for instance, like I try to meditate on that fact when St. Patrick's Day comes around, and honestly, like, I fail at it. It's not like I'm just like prostrate in prayer all day on St. Patrick's Day. Like, I'm not gonna make myself out to be like, massive pietist like that, but try to, carve out like at least a couple minutes on these holidays that originated with like Christian saints. Like, they did some amazing things. St. Valentine did something amazing. St. Patrick did something amazing. All Hallows Eve used to be about honoring Christian saints. Like, a bunch of these holidays that we celebrate in the West should be remembered for what they used to be and recovered, because they've just been bastardized, ruined by the degens.
There you go.
And by us. We participate in it. So a lot of it's on us for, tacitly participating in them, one way or the other.
Well, there you go. So resist by getting rejected by your girlfriend on Valentine's Day. So, all right.
Just the crying soy jack meme.
I'm not regressing back to high school at all. So, boys, it has been 3 hours and 43 minutes.
Dang, we're killing it.
I'll leave it up to you. You want to make it for 4, or you want to call it good?
Let's before we end, I just wanted to go ahead and play that last video I sent you. It's only 1 minute.
Last video. Okay, here we go.
It's the little kids version.
Oh, that's
good. I might understand it.
Oh, you said little kids version, and then I saw a DC plane crash. I was like, wait, hold on.
that was our next topic. That was our next topic. We got past this one.
No.
Getting late.
So this is the one he's referring to. All right.
So why do we celebrate Valentine's Day?
What?
This is basically what we're teaching our kids.
Okay.
And how did it start? It's believed that Valentine's Day was started in Rome during the reign of Emperor Claudius II. Claudius made weddings against the law. Believing this was unjust, a defiant Roman priest named Bishop Valentine, would secretly marry couples in his church. Claudius found out, and Valentine was sent to jail. His execution was set for February 14th. The jailer's daughter would bring Valentine his food, and soon they fell in love. The night before his death, Valentine wrote the jailer's daughter a love letter, and he signed it, Your Valentine. Ever since, February 14th has been a day that we celebrate love, and we show the people in our lives just how much we adore and appreciate them.
I have a question.
Well, that's pretty condensed, but I guess it points across.
Extremely.
There you go.
So, didn't Rome have a 10-month calendar?
I have no idea.
Not sure. I couldn't speak to that.
Greg might know, but I mean,
I'm pretty sure they did. How they just gonna say February 14th?
Well, that's what I was saying. That's what I was trying to get at is, we teach. This is what I would have learned in school.
Right. I get what you're taking from it, but yeah.
The not having the deeper context and deeper meanings, which is what the rest of the other video was going to go into. But yeah.
Excuse me.
As far as Rome having a different calendar, I'm sure they did.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. So there's the condensed version, and I think we've talked about whether or not it's okay to celebrate Valentine's Day or these holidays in general. We've chased just about everything I could think of, unless somebody else has got another thought.
No.
No?
No, just remember valiant, men in history who did amazing things. So a lot of them are responsible for our culture, and we can still have that. We can still revive that. Even if we never have that back in society again, where everybody together recognizes the value behind these holidays for what they're truly supposed to be, we can still have, our little pockets of resistance, where we have groups of people who spread the message like, hey, this is the history behind this holiday. This is why it matters that we don't just give up on it. There could still be a movement that can at least wake up a group, wake up, some people to the value of history.
Yeah.
And why we have these. They're not just like hallmarky bullcrap throwaway holidays. They matter. Holiday, holy day. It's marked as a holy day because something amazing happened that we're commemorating on this day.
Yeah.
We should remember that. That's my parting thought.
Sweet. Well, with all that being said, I think we're going to call it a night. And this is the end of the live stream.
Yep.
So you can go home now.
It's getting late.
Yeah.
15. This might be our latest stream.
Yeah, I think it's the longest one I've ever had. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, does Jen have any final thoughts?
Every month, the 28, 29 days, I remember seeing it talked about on YouTube somewhere. She's like, I'm all over this thing.
She said there was a 13th. There could have been a 13-month calendar at some point, but there also could be a 10-month if they just add more days. I think it's changed throughout history. But
Gotcha. Okay.
Maybe we could do an episode on
Cody,
10-month was probably
right.
33 days.
10 months.
All right.
Is that 33 days in every month?
13.
What I'm seeing here, I asked the good old
idea.
Crank Dat GPT. It's a 10-month calendar, 304 days overall. That was the early Roman calendar.
Interesting. Very
pretty
interesting.
cool.
Yeah, circa 8th century BC.
Gotcha. Very nice. Well,
The year started in March. Yeah.
There you go.
Huh. So there was no February.
What? We've been lied
no
to.
January, no February.
My world is falling apart all over again.
We'll
All
have
right.
to do a deep dive into calendars.
In fairness, though,
Yeah.
the day. Yeah, in fairness, though, St. Valentine's is probably just adjusted to the best of our knowledge, adapted to our calendar.
Yeah.
This is the point in the year, the lunar cycle that it probably fell on.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah. Well, if all that wonderful stuff said, guys, thank you so much for watching.
We appreciate you.
Yes, we appreciate you. And remember, Hallmark means hell. Good night, everyone.